All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Girls are raised to be blind to the double standards from which we benefit. It's not wool in front of one's eyes at that point, but duct tape over them. Pulling it off is hard, and tends to offend the nerves quite a bit. HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. When I was a kid, my brother and I had a toy car, similar in selling point to the battery-operated bump-and-go car. Upon hitting any stationary object, the car would back up an inch or two, turn slightly, and start forward again. It was kind of fun to run it through a messy room and watch it navigate around all the other toys, or send it into a corner and watch it bump and turn its way back out. Or place it where no turn could free it and watch it get stuck slowly ping-ponging itself around in a circle. Where else have I seen something like this? I get it in political discussion all the time. We've talked about the zero-sum game wherein many people are unable to discuss human rights issues from the standpoint that they should apply to everyone, but instead react as if human rights recognition for a given demographic relies on ignoring or infringing on the human rights of the proverbial other. An example is feminists accusing due process advocates of opposing the rights of crime victims, supposedly denying them justice. We know the fallacy in that. Basing government authorities' response to criminal allegations on evidence and reason isn't a way to thwart justice, but to ensure that the pursuit of vengeance in the wake of one injustice does not lead to another injustice and an abuse of community resources. The knee-jerk reaction, however, is not to see it that way. The underlying view of human rights as a tug-of-war between the sexes leads to the unconscious view of women's human rights struggle as evidence of an imbalance between the sexes, with women at the short end of the strand of recognition and men at the long end. This creates the illusion of a need to even things out that necessitates shortening men's end of the strand in order to lengthen women's end. In our example, it makes it easier to mistake compromise of men's due process rights for a pathway to evening things out in sexual violence cases, placing due process advocates in the position of having to dismantle that misconception before even discussing the importance of an evidence-based justice system. We've also talked about a phenomenon Alison labeled the negative-sum game, wherein our society is so willing to treat men as disposable that not only is adversity easier to recognize as a problem when its effects on women are highlighted, but it's actually harder for people to recognize the same adversity as the same level of problem if its effects on men are highlighted. It's presumed not as bad if it hurts both sexes as if it only hurts women. If we discuss human rights from a standpoint that sees the strand of recognition as simply too short altogether, with both sexes disadvantaged and both sexes in need of the benefits of social and legal reform, we are accused of minimizing the problem, not because this hurts everyone is smaller than this hurts women, but because gynocentrists view a factor's relationship to men as a normalizing effect that, in turn, minimizes its overall threat. One of the biggest disconnects men's rights activism butts up against is that we see an entirely different picture, and we do not shy away from it, even when it is hard to face. We see that both sexes face different versions of the conditions to which feminists claim to object, an unfair matrix of legal and social standards and practices, including obligations, expectations, restrictions, and stereotypes that have disadvantaged individuals of both sexes throughout history. There is no tug-of-war, just an effort to dismantle aspects of our society's standards and practices that are detrimental or damaging to individual or community welfare. We don't confuse normal with okay or atypical with wrong. We'd be in trouble from the get-go if we did, because atypical is an apt descriptor one way or another for most of us. This is why, when confronted with information that challenges our subconscious attitudes, preconceived notions, upbringing, and self-images, We respond with unrelenting curiosity rather than fear and avoidance. We're that kid who looks in the closet or under the bed to find out what that noise was while the other kids are all screaming for an adult to come save them from the monster, because we're more intrigued than afraid. And it turns out there is no monster, only information. It's when we share that information that the bump and go phenomenon takes place. This week I saw it in 4 separate conversations. One tweep was doing okay with the idea that there are areas in which men are disadvantaged, as long as she could cling to the image of women having it worse throughout history, maintain the privilege of having her sensibilities toward harsh language coddled, and expect other women to back her if she insisted on enforcing those conditions on the conversation. Another just could not see his way to including equal accountability in a discussion on reproductive rights. A third took issue with the idea that men face any discrimination at all. A whole host of women jumped at the chance to take personally a tweet sent out by Bettina Arndt in response to an article on the potential for a new Twitter emoji to be used as commentary on men's penis size, in which she merely wondered how feminists would react if the sexes were reversed in it. Their response was a priceless display of lack of self-awareness and entitlement to a double standard they couldn't even fully recognize, proving her point better than she could have done had she made a declaration instead of asking a question. One woman in that conversation was so freaked out by the challenge to the double standard that she went on a goalpost-moving sprint from denying that the article was about its own subject to making up a badly flawed victim story to use as a bludgeon in the discussion. Then she freaked out when called on it and announced that she was muting. In each instance I saw the same thing, something I've seen in the past as well, over and over. Individuals whose preconceived notions regarding gender issues were formed based on incomplete or incorrect information recoiled from the presentation of facts and logic that contradicted those beliefs, then turned and attempted to steer the conversation in a different direction. It was like the information was affected by the somebody else's problem field described in Life, the Universe, and Everything by Douglas Adams, such that anyone confronted with it would go to subtle but extraordinary measures to disregard rather than deal with it. Only in this case, it's not just a subtle avoidance reaction. It's underwritten by fear. Information that contradicts a single political position is not, in and of itself, scary. But when it contradicts a part of the foundation upon which one's entire outlook is based, it's terrifying. People will do anything to avoid it. A lot of the phenomenon of special pleading in arguments comes from the debater's inability to wrap his or her mind around a concept that challenges one of those foundational attitudes or beliefs. An individual accustomed to a hierarchy of accountability that places women between men and children instead of on the same level as men simply cannot come to grips with a debate point that relies on gender-equal accountability standards. Evidence of men's vulnerability will unnerve an individual who only sees them as powerful or strong, or even just treats reliability as a defining male characteristic. These confrontations are the solid object the mind cannot bypass, the door to the closet where the boogeyman hides, ready to jump out and tell you that women are not wonderful, but only human. That men are not gods or devils, but also only human. The resulting mental gymnastics are the discussion version of the holy freaking yucky spider heebie-jeebie dance, not just at the ideas, but at this suddenly creepy individual who dares to discuss them. By virtue of having your hand on the door, of having pulled the blankets up to stare into the abyss, you're now infected with whatever it is that your discussion partner cannot bring him or herself to confront. You have triggered the normie. Prepare for meltdown. Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 72, Wrongthink Boogeyman, a glitch in the Matrix. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with She Who Must Be Obeyed, Karen Strawn, Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren B., and the tenacious Tardigrade of Truth, Karn 33333, from the Water Bear Brigade. If you haven't seen him before, you should definitely check out the Water Bear Brigade. There's quite a bit of interesting discussion on that channel. We're here tonight to rip off the bondage, or the bandage, and let the information shine in. But first, as usual, we've got a couple of things to go over. Like the fact that if you haven't already, you need to head on over to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. You know, you got to keep an eye on us, or who knows what'll happen. If you want to support our work, even in the midst of all of the financial blacklisting that is taking place today, feedthebadger.com is the most stable way to help out. So remember, Badger Feed for information, and Feed the Badger to support our work. And speaking of Badgers working, remember Karen will be part of the post-showing panel at the Red Pill in Fort McMurray in Alberta on Sunday the 17th, so that's this Sunday. If you're in the area and you want to see the film and pelt Karen with questions afterwards, the showing is from 2:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. There's a link in the low bar to the event page on Eventbrite where you can register to attend. I'm not sure if you actually have to register, but definitely, if you get a chance to, this is a free event, guys. So if you're in the area, what's stopping you from checking it out? And the last thing is, if you want the opportunity to nag everyone else into checking us out, don't forget to smash that like button and share us on every social media site you use. It'll trigger the snowflakes. Not like they're triggered enough already, right?
Well, I just want to say, speaking of snowflakes, that in terms of the Fort McMurray showing of the Red Pill, screening of the Red Pill, I will be braving what has been called lethal highway. I will be driving between 5 and 7 hours on that highway, a highway where salt does not work because it is essentially minus 40 here. That's the temperature where Celsius and Fahrenheit shake hands and go their separate ways. And the sand that they've dumped on the highway won't stick because the snowpack is too hard, right? So literally, I will be risking my life to be in Fort McMurray, and you'd better frickin' show up. God damn it.
There you go. Y'all better come see Karen, or she's going to be mad. You don't want to see Karen mad. It's worse than a triggered snowflake.
You don't want to see me when I'm angry. You don't.
She must be obeyed, people.
That's
Come
right.
on. She must be obeyed.
So this week's topic is sort of a continuation of last week's topic, and it's partly based on I have had some really enlightening conversations on Twitter in the last week. And it's not that people gave me information that changed my outlook. It was watching people squirm to get away from information that challenged their unconscious biases, and in particular gynocentrism. And that one tweet that Bettina sent out, she had, like, there was just an article that basically pointed out that it's probable that a new emoji on Twitter that just looks like a hand with the fingers together, like the a little bit symbol, or the crushing your head symbol halfway through the act of crushing, and like the article pointed out that there were going to be women using that as a commentary on men's penis size, and she just questioned, what would happen if the sexes were reversed. Boy, feminists and other angry women just flooded the comment thread underneath to prove her right. Her insinuation obviously was that they would not accept that. They wouldn't tolerate it. She used the phrase roomy vaginas, and they just freaked out, starting with some lady from some podcast. Roomy vaginas. There is no such thing as roomy vaginas.
Oh, there is. I'm sorry, but there is. There are such things as roomy vaginas, and I have been in possession of one from time to time in the months following passing a large object through them, through that particular part of my body. And yes, it became quite roomy. You can get it back, not to factory floor condition, but you can get it back to a reasonably functional condition with Kegels and some just general all-purpose usage, but exercise. But it honestly,
yeah, they exist.
Honestly, after I had my first kid, okay, and I tore with all of my kids, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh no, I didn't just tear my perineum, right? The floor of my pelvis. I actually tore my cervix with all of my kids. Yeah, because it happened that fast, right? My contractions were that hard. That's why they were hearing me screaming out in the parking lot.
The vaginas.
Yeah. So and then I had stitches, and after I think it was after my second child, I got the flu, like within a day. I picked it up at the hospital, I'm sure, right?
Probably.
Yeah, and I got the flu, and I had this horrible racking cough that went with it, and I popped my stitches, right? And I actually had to take a mirror and look to see what had happened, right? And it just looked like raw hamburger. The whole fucking area just looked like a pound of raw hamburger. And I was like, is that what women look like after they give birth? What the fuck are we like? Why would any woman choose to do this? Right? Like it destroys you. And so, honestly, a roomy vagina, I have a friend. I will not mention who it is. It is someone that I know, an acquaintance, friendly acquaintance. But she went into labor early, and the baby's head became engaged in the pelvis, right? Which is, that's birth is imminent at that point. And you have to go on bed rest and stay in the hospital. And they refused to deliver this baby. They made her remain in this state. They stopped the labor and made her remain in this state with the baby's head engaged for 3 weeks.
That's crazy.
And then allowed her to deliver. And that's, sacrificing the condition of the mother for the condition of the baby. Sure. I mean, I can see that,
Isn't that a danger to the baby, though, to be stuck in that position?
No, not with the head engaged in the pelvis. With the head stuck in the birth canal, yes. But with the head just engaged in the pelvis, it's essentially just like everything's ready to go. And but because she went 3 weeks, stop bugging the dog. Because she went 3 weeks with this baby's head engaged in her pelvis, she ended up with uterine prolapse.
Good God.
Right? So she goes pee one day a couple of weeks after she has the baby, and she's wiping, and she's like, that feels like it's tickling my cervix. What the hell is going on? And she got out a mirror and had a look, and there's her cervix right there at the opening of her vagina. Yeah.
Okay.
And her bladder's there at the opening of her vagina. Right? And
never having babies.
Oh my God.
See, none of that stuff happened when I had mine. But he just holed up in the rib cage and they had to go in after him with a knife. So I didn't go through any of the I got right up to the last stage, and they figured out this baby is not going to get through the cervix. The dumbass nurse I had was a newbie, and she saw the part of the head that had crowned, meaning that's the part you can see the cervix opening around, and she thought that was it. That was all. The bigger he was, and No. he was almost 2 weeks old when he was born.
There was a little more head than that.
There was a lot more baby than that. So, yeah, so I've had any emergency C-section, so I didn't experience any of that other stuff.
I had a friend who...
But in any case,
who had to have a forceps delivery that ended up...
The show is not about childbirth.
No,
so
the show is about, honestly, there are a whole bunch of ways where, that our bodies can be, can end up not in peak condition. And
we can laugh about that when it's, talking about our own bodies. And women get away with laughing about that and saying all kinds of nasty-ass things when it's men's bodies. In fact, I brought up in one of those discussions, the point that creep shaming is sort of it's a gendered thing. You do not hear women getting called creeps for being unattractive, having unattractive features, being
having
fat,
a sex
having
drive,
body odor,
having libido while unattractive is the basic of a creep.
And that's it. But women say the most horrible things about them and get away with it. And that was in the discussion with I guess she does a podcast. She's apparently very clever because she came up with the title Mueller, She Wrote, which is based, I guess, on Murder, She Wrote. So that's, brilliant or whatever. But in any case, it's a pun.
You would know.
It's a pun. It's a decent pun, but I guess it's targeting Gen Xers and older because I don't think very many people younger than Gen X know that show.
No.
I know of it, but I've never watched it.
Yeah.
Oh, I had to watch it, but only because we only had 3 channels when I was a kid.
I got encephalitis while I was watching that show, actually. But I still like the show. I didn't get it from the show. I got it from a mosquito bite, which was very triggering. In any case, she had a fit about the insinuation that women's vaginas might not be perfect. It was very upsetting to her and her followers, who all showed up in the thread. Have this, and she's the one. She went on this bizarre, she's not the one I talked about in the opening monologue. There was another feminist that showed up to defend her, and showed up to attack the idea that this was about what it was about, and she just went on this bizarre sprint, like I said, she starts out with, well, that's not what the emoji's about, and it goes on. Well, that's what the article was about. Well, but the article says in the article that that's not what the emoji's about, and it's just about men being triggered. So I went and started screenshotting the text because that wasn't even in the article. She hadn't even read the article. And it goes from there. When I proved her wrong, it started getting into, men aren't, mistreated, and women are, and women shouldn't be treated this way. And then, and I went into the point about creep shaming, and she went into, well, men are perpetrators and blah, blah, blah. And it just it went on this bizarre, it went on this bizarre, she starts out we're talking about an emoji, not deep philosophical issues, not gender disparity and criminal perpetration, not, why she's terrified apparently of men. Just an emoji.
An emoji.
Okay, I go to a very liberal church. In fact, half the congregation is probably an atheist or agnostic. And last Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a woman gets up on the podium and she goes through all this stuff, and she goes about feminism back in the day, and she's reading from this thing, and it all boils down to men bad, women good, all men violent, all women healers and nurturers and all this other crap. And I keep thinking in my head, what gender is most known for poisoning their children so they can look important?
Oh yeah, the Munchausen by proxy. That's like a huge thing. Like Munchausen syndrome itself, right? Faking an illness in order to get attention from medical professionals and sympathy from people around you, right? That's a primarily female thing, right?
And what gender is most likely to kill their children?
Yeah. No, and Munchausen's by proxy is predominantly female perpetrated on innocent children. Sometimes the children end up dead. And then on top of that, you look at it and you think, okay, so we have a whole system. We have a whole infrastructure built in the United States and elsewhere, right? Designed around female, like mothers committing infanticide, right? We have a whole infrastructure built around that. It's called the Safe Haven or Baby Moses laws, right? Where please don't kill your child. Please just drop it off at the nearest fire station or police station or hospital anonymously. You don't need to leave your name. You can walk away from it. And there you go, right? Because it's so common that we had to make laws that would allow women to, that would give women an option other than to strangle their baby with a pair of thong panties and throw it over the fence and then try and blame it on the neighbor or the boyfriend.
Well,
right?
And it's so horrifying to address the issue that young women can be can engage in violence against the most helpful or most helpless time of a person's life, right? Against the most helpless you can be, an infant. Exactly. Rather than go through and say this is an area of violence, we need to evaluate, find out what are the causes behind women doing this, and actually address the causes. They slapped a Band-Aid on it. You can abandon your child here, and nobody has to be any the wiser.
Yeah, we don't address the issues. We just, shoo it away, So now
don't put your baby in a dumpster. Put it in a baby box.
No, the last one was in a trash can during freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
And they were looking for the mother. Now, every single time I see a story about a woman abandoning her child in a dumpster or a trash can or driving the car with the kids in the back into the ocean, every time there's a slew of women saying, oh, gee, I wonder how much stress she was under. It was probably because of some man.
She every time have help. She must have slipped through the cracks.
Yeah,
she didn't have enough assistance. She was a good mom, but she really struggled. And
hold on, I'm not done. So then the next thing, right, is when I mentioned that some woman cut a guy's penis off and like destroyed it in some fashion. One woman cut off her husband's penis twice, right? And whenever I tell this story, the first thing out of women in real life, women I actually like.
What did he do?
What did he do to deserve it? Not once in my entire life have I ever heard a man say, what did a woman do to deserve getting raped? Not once, not ever.
No, and you won't, because most men, when they hear that even a woman they don't know, look at what
Liam Neeson is going through right now.
Yeah, and that was another tough one for people to confront, because what he said there was his protective nature is so ingrained and so fundamental to his character that when it's in particular in respect to the women he's close to, that when he heard that something awful that he would view as probably the worst thing that could happen, because that's what people are told about rape, right? That he was so enraged by the attack on her, by the information, that it took him out of his normal character, and he was actually considering doing something that is out of character for him, to the degree that he asked himself when he started to come around, what the hell are you doing? Like, what kind of what kind of sympathy do you have to have for a person that you can be completely blind with rage at to the degree that you would track strangers down and it wouldn't even matter which one? That's, and people can't confront that.
Well,
because
and
then
you know
they
what?
have to
You know what
confront
people couldn't.
the other end of it.
You know what people couldn't confront about that, right? Because they pilloried him, right? And the reason they pilloried him was because the perpetrator happened to be black.
Yeah.
And so he essentially said, I went out with a knife on my person in neighborhoods where I would run into black men, and I walked around hoping that a black man, a black bastard, he said, right? Some black bastard, right? Some black ruffian, somebody who is not a good person, right? Would come out of a pub and start some shit with me, right? So that I would have an excuse to kill a black man as a proxy for this black man who raped my friend, right? And he didn't go out hunting black men. This is the thing that really frustrated me about this. He didn't go out hunting black men. He went out hoping that a black man who happened to be a ruffian, a rapscallion, a ne'er-do-well, a freaking thug, whatever, would start something with him so he would have an excuse, right? So it's not like he was just going to go and kill random black men. No, he wanted somebody to start something with him so he could get his anger out, right? And what everybody focused on was the fact that, the racism of it, right? Nobody focused on the fact that that he wasn't looking for a black person, a black man, woman, or child. He was looking specifically, I'm sorry, there's a snoring person in the room. He was looking specifically for a black man, and nobody pointed out the sexism there. Nobody, even though we collectively blame men for everything, nobody seems to be able to wrap their heads around the idea that Liam Neeson was willing to kill a man. And when he clarified his statements, he said, if it had been an Estonian man, I would have gone after a man who was Estonian. If it had been somebody who was Asian, I would have gone after an Asian man, right? If it was a Muslim, I would have gone after a Muslim man, right? Whatever it was, it would have been a man, right? Nobody notices that. Nobody cares. Nobody fucking gives a shit, right? That he was willing to make a man who vaguely fit the description of the man who did this, right? Pay the price for another man's actions, that's what patriarchy theory is. Yeah. Men pay the price for other men's actions. But it's so common and it's so typical, right? That we just don't even notice it now.
Yeah, well, there's another aspect to that too. And this is something that people have a rough time touching as well. He had a story from someone close to him. I don't know all of the details of that story. I don't know if there was a police report or if there was not a police report. I don't know if there was a complaint, that was taken to court or any of that, right?
It was a real allegation or a
false allegation. And that's my point. When we talk about false allegations and the seriousness of false allegations, what he admitted to is evidence of the danger of accepting allegations on faith. Because if a woman had reason to lie to him about that, and to be honestly blunt, a lot of white girls who lie about something, a lot of white girls who lie about this particular thing,
maybe she was pregnant with a half black baby and they were in a relationship and who the fuck knows.
But a lot of white girls who lie about being raped claim their attackers are black, because it is easier to paint a disembodied black guy, somebody that doesn't exist, right, as your boogeyman if you're white. And that's something that has existed in our society for a great deal of time, and it's not gone. So I'm not saying specifically for anybody that's listening that I think this accusation was false. But what we understand from this is that if it had been, the result with him wouldn't have been any different. And there have been instances where women who have made such an accusation have set off angry mobs that have killed their accused targets who were innocent.
And this is what I would like to point out about the entire situation behind Liam's rage. You have to understand, this is a person that plays a hero fictionally, and in real life someone came to him with a problem that he could not fix. So his reaction was to just go out and try to retaliate in whatever way he knew how. And that was to go after the description of the person that, was told to him. So I can't exactly blame him for going after a quote unquote, a black guy, because if that's who this person told him had done this offense against them, then yeah, I could see his rage against anyone who could look like that. But at the same time, yes, it's not justified. You can't just go out and try to get justice from your own hands. That's not how the system works.
Well, I mean, but again, right? Again, I'm looking at the situation, right? And he's got this murderous rage in his heart, right? And he has his target, his proxy target, that anyone who fits the description, right, is going to get it if they start something with him, right? And but he did not go out and start things with black men. He went out walking around hoping that a black man would start something with him, right? And no black men started something with him. And then after a week or a week and a half, he was like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah,
right?
In fact, that probably alone made him think nobody did start shit with him.
Yeah. And and then he's like, you know what? This whole fucking thing about retaliation and revenge and all of this stuff, right? It's horrible. I mean, like, I think, I was watching, and I just only started watching Atheism is Unstoppable, Devin Tracy, right? And I never watched him before because his voice annoys me, and I don't know why. There's just something about it that annoys me. Call me weird. I fall asleep to V's voice, right? V Monroe, right? Screechy Romanian. But he said, essentially, this is a story of a man who's like, revenge is not okay. Revenge just leads to more revenge, right? And he used the example of one of my favorite films, Last of the Mohicans, right? And he said that, at the end of that film, Nathaniel and Chinachcook, or whatever his name is, they get revenge on Magua for killing Uncas and killing Alice, and so they get their revenge. But the whole story starts with Magua, right, wanting revenge on Monroe, right? Monroe, the father of these two young women, Alice and Cora, right? And who form the center of this, the gynocentric center of this story, right? Alice and Cora, right? Magua is getting revenge on Monroe, General Monroe or Colonel Monroe, for essentially he took Magua captive. Magua's wife believed he was dead, married another person, had children, right? And he ended up being dead to his tribe. He was dishonored, all of this stuff, right? And so he was going to kill General Monroe and wipe his seed from the face of the earth, right? So kill both the daughters. That was his mission for revenge, right? So you literally have this entire huge movie that starts with a revenge story and ends with a revenge story. And it's just like, that is the whole idea of that kind of revenge just is, it really is just perpetuating violence. It is just, and you even see in the movie, the Huron chief who essentially says, okay, so here's how we're going to do justice, right? You know, the younger daughter is going to go with Magua, so his heart is healed, as, you know, as his wife, so his heart is healed. The older daughter is going to go and be burned in the fire so that Magua's hate burns less bright. And Nathaniel's going to go free in peace, right? And that's how we're going to deal with this, to put a stop to it, right? Because you have to stamp on that hard, or it just continues, right? And so, I mean, like, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know, for somebody to actually snap out of that on his own, after no tussles, no fights, no nothing, no provoking anything, let alone allowing himself to be provoked, right? Or ending up being provoked. You know, a whole week and a half, he felt a murderous rage. That's to get mad at him for that. That's stupid. That's stupid.
To contrast this, years ago on Reddit, now it's actually, oh gosh, we've been doing this for 6 years, so it's been at least 7, I think. Maybe even 8 years ago, there was a discussion about a mother in, I think, Brazil, whose her daughter had been raped by an adult. Daughter was like somewhere 11, 13, something, that age group, really young, pre-adolescent to early adolescent girl. And this guy had been tried and convicted and gone to prison. And somehow that area has a thing where they let people out for the weekend from prison or something. It was a weird story, but he was on this kind of furlough, and he saw the mother on the street, and he said to her, "How's your daughter?" Which just set her off, just enraged her, put her through all of the things that she had gone through, you know, dealing with her daughter's suffering and her daughter's experience and everything. So she watched him go into a bar. Then she went home, got herself a gas can, went to a gas station, filled it up, took it into the bar, dumped it on him, and set him on fire. And he ended up in the hospital. Took him 11 days to die. And I read that story and I was horrified all the way around.
Oh yeah, no.
Everything about that story is horrible.
It's horrific.
What ended up happening on Reddit in this discussion was a lot of people.
She was justified.
Yeah, she was justified. He deserved it. Heat of the moment. And I had to argue with people about this. Heat of the moment is right now. Heat of the moment, when you are taking an action and you are jumping somebody, you are actually attacking. What she did wasn't heat of the moment. She took the time to go and get the gas can. She took the time to go to the gas station and get the gas. She took the time to go back to the bar. I know heat of the moment's a bad pun with respect to fire.
Yeah.
There, Amy song. But But in any case, this had to have taken several minutes to, over an hour before she had everything to go back into that bar and dump the gas on him and set him on fire. So this wasn't an instant reaction.
Yeah, there's no way that could be considered not premeditated.
Well, exactly. And the thing was, I mean, and they did eventually, they were lenient with her under the law. Because I did find the further information about that case, based on what this guy had done. But the fact was, people could not confront, the choice, I guess you could say, between considering this woman's action bad and considering his action bad. They could not deal with the concept of having sympathy for the suffering of a man who did something terrible and was deserving of some punishment for doing that terrible thing. And it was very difficult for people to look at it from the perspective I was offering.
That's where we get into moral typecasting, you know, like I was listening to a conversation on Heterodox Academy with a woman who did some research. I'm not sure if it's published yet. It was when she did the podcast, it was under peer review. But essentially saying that, you know, you have such a thing as, you know, we have in our mind in terms of certain types of moral, you know, like you have Jonathan Haidt, who has his 5 moral foundations or whatever they are, right? But one of the ones that are most like that both the right and the left have in common is care and harm, care versus harm, right? And so you look at moral typecasting in that sense, and men are almost like we want to break everything down into perpetrator, an agentic perpetrator who acts out of his own volition, and an innocent victim who is acted upon, right? And we are much more likely, and this cross-culturally, so Norwegian university students, people in South Korea, you know, middle managers in South Korea, right? You know, versus people in the United States, right? Much more likely to put in any situation, if you de-sex everything, if you even dehumanize a scenario and you look at, you put people in front of a screen where they're shown 2 triangles and one of them pokes the other, right? And causes harm. And the other retaliates, right? And causes harm back, right? You're most likely to see the instigator, the initiator, the perpetrator as the man, describe it as the man, as male, and the victim as female. If you talk about a surgeon who's being abusive to a trainee, right? Somebody who's training under them, people are way more likely to say that the surgeon is male and the trainee is female, right? All of these things, right? Doesn't even matter if you have a hierarchical structure there, right? Just, you know, laterally, coworkers. A coworker is abusing another coworker who's at the same level as they are, right? And causing harm. You know, who is the woman and who is the man? Well, the one who is harmed is the woman, and the one who is doing the harm is the man. We have this way of seeing men, and you see it in all of those social experiments where, you know, what was the, I forget what the guy's name was who did the ABC series, What Would You Do? I think it was for 2020 or something like that. You know, where he had a woman just beating the shit out of a man in public on a park bench for hours and hours and hours as 180 something people walk by and do nothing, right? Including an undercover cop, or not an off-duty cop, right? Just walk by and watch it happen. And, you know, what did they ask these people afterwards? Well, you know, I thought he had it coming. I thought he must have done something to deserve it. I thought his action must have caused her to react in some way. So he must have been the bad actor, and she was simply, and you look at this in domestic violence research done by Johnston and all of these other feminist researchers, right, who describe even female initiating violence, even female unilateral violence, right, as self-defensive or violent resistance. Violent resistance. right? So violent resistance to patriarchal oppression, to patriarchal control by their spouse, even if he's never laid a finger on them, even if he's done nothing, right? We're going to look at it through the lens of she's resisting the patriarchy, right? Because she can't actually act of her own volition. It's this whole fucking dynamic is so across the board and across cultures. It's insane.
Have you ever heard of the cucumber experiment?
Cucumber? Well, I only heard about the cucumber experiment wherein a friend of mine accidentally put it back in the fridge and then her husband prepared it in a salad at a dinner party.
Not quite.
I've heard about the grapefruit experiment.
Oh, God. No, the cucumber experiment. What's the cucumber experiment, Karn?
Okay, so there's two monkeys in a cage. They throw a little pebble into the cage, and when the monkey picks up the pebble and hands it back to the researcher gives the monkey a cucumber. And this goes on between the two monkeys, like about 100 times, 1,000 times, whatever, right? Then they switch it up. They throw the pebble in, the monkey picks up the pebble, hands it to the researcher gives a pebble, goes to the next monkey, throws in the pebble, monkey picks up the pebble, hands it back to the researcher, but this time the researcher gives the monkey a grape. The other monkey in the other cage...
The other monkey gets really fucking pissed.
Right.
And he just got a cucumber and not a grape. Yeah.
Cucumber was fine before, but once there's a grape involved, all of a sudden, something's unfair. This crosses every species because we all have a sense of right and wrong and fairness, right? Now, going all the way back to Liam Neeson's thing, someone he really cares about was harmed. As a man, he can't do anything. There's nothing to fix. He doesn't know what to do with these emotions. He's never been in this situation before. So how does he fix it? Well, he can find some guy who's a ruffian, and maybe that'll give him some sense of justice, right? So it doesn't matter that's a black man. It matters that there's someone who fits the profile, and maybe he can fuck that person up. And if he fucks that person up, maybe that'll give him a sense of justice, right? But it won't. And he realizes this after a week because he realizes all he's going to do with this hatred that's built up is harm some innocent person, probably equally, if not more so, than his friend was. And all he's doing is perpetuating violence. Now, it takes him over a week to figure this out, but that's what blinding rage does.
Well,
with your story about that girl being raped and then the mother attacking him later, there was a story in the UK where this girl has her picture put all over the internet of her being naked. She assumes it was her ex-boyfriend who does this, takes acid, throws it in his lap. So quickly it disintegrates his penis that he takes his pants off as soon as possible, and still that doesn't help. And he doesn't press charges.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't even do it.
Oh my God. Like what the fuck? You know, like honestly, here's the thing, right? Because we have cases where, you know, you have a situation where there was a young man in the UK again, who was 18 years old, who a girl accused him of raping her. I think they might have had sex at some point, but I'm not sure. Accused him of raping her to her friends, and her friends beat and tortured him to death and then drowned him, right? Like beat him and tortured him and then drowned him. And she actually was on the stand saying, I didn't intend for any of this to happen. And so I think that what what women really need to understand is these kinds of accusations can cause all kinds of freaking nightmarish feelings in men, right? That I think, honestly, I think that in some ways the feminist narrative that man is essentially exploits women and subordinates women and oppresses women, right? That's what men do, right? And they do it all for their own benefit. That they really underestimate the protective nature of men and the kind of rage that comes over men when the women that they care about, and I don't understand how this is something that these women don't know when you have movies like Taken and, when you even have movies like, what was that one with Keanu Reeves with the puppy? Where like they killed his puppy and he went on a freaking rampage, right? That was the last straw. That
John Wick.
John Wick, yeah. Like literally you have men who see people, if they see people or animals or whatever as vulnerable, right? And they are capable of enacting violence, right? They will go and take revenge. That's what they do. There was another case where in the UK where a 15-year-old boy was accused by a schoolmate because he had actually declined to go on a date with her. She wanted to go out with him. She wanted him to be her boyfriend. And he said, no, I'm not interested. So she accused him, and he was only accused. The police dropped the charges. They were just like, nah, this is not, there's nothing here, right? And he was out delivering papers, right? And an adult man, a 38-year-old man, tapped him on the shoulder, and when he went to turn around, the guy cold-cocked him and then beat the ever-loving shit out of him and put him in the hospital because his picture was in the paper. He was a rapist, right? And like, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, like, how many women who've murdered their babies have been beaten in the streets by vigilante mobs?
And you don't actually see anything. In fact, people will defend women who have done terrible things, like we've talked about. Oh, what was going through her mind at the time? What was this poor woman's stress level? What was she experiencing? I think I put into the thread of discussion about the woman whose baby was found in the trash. If she wasn't the victim of a kidnapping where the kidnapper discarded her baby because the baby wasn't what he or she was after, then there's not really an excuse.
Yeah, no, and like what I remember, I recall this. I think it was in Detroit or Michigan or Minnesota or one of the M states, right? Years and years and years ago, there's this woman who killed her. I think it was 4 children, right? And the initial news reports, right? Like everybody knew at that point. It was just like the cops discovered her in this apartment with her children dead, and and essentially nobody knew anything at that point, right? Why she did it, whatever, right? But the media reported it. What they reported was that the dad of these children was trying to get custody of them, right? He had launched a custody bid. And so what they ended up spinning it like in the initial reports before anybody knew why or, like any investigation had been done, the spin in the media was that she had obviously been driven to the edge by an abusive man who was going to take her children away. And he was abusive, so she thought that she would spare them from this abuse, right, by killing them. She didn't kill herself, but by killing them. And, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, let's step back and take a look at this and ask, why would a black man, because these people were black, right? Why would a black man fight tooth and nail in court for custody of his children, right? Maybe maybe there's an off chance that he's an abuser and he's just trying to make her life miserable. But maybe he knows she's a fucking psycho and she's about to kill his kids.
Maybe.
Maybe. Just maybe.
And how dare a father, give a damn about his children
and put that poor woman in that position where she had to choose between handing her children over to him or killing them.
Right.
And that's reverse the sexes on that. You have, oh gosh, I can't think of his name. There were two. One set himself on fire. The other one made the news for killing himself.
Thomas Ball.
Yeah, Thomas Ball set himself on fire. The other fellow made the news for killing himself, and feminists just went apeshit over the idea that it was because of pain. They were
using suicide, their own suicides, as a tool of abuse.
Yeah, that's what they were claiming. The guy I'm thinking of is the one that Janet did the video where she read his suicide letter, and I don't know how she read that letter without sobbing. It just...
Oh, she's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't be able to do it. That was a gut-wrenching suicide letter. It was angering to hear what was done to this family by this mother. But it's something that people have a terrible time confronting, the idea that women can be bad at all. And so they'll look at an action and they'll decide based on whether it's a woman's action or a man's action, girl's action or a boy's action, is this bad or not? If the perpetrator of the action, the person performing the action, is female, whether the action would normally be bad or not, they will come up with excuses. And it takes something like, here in the Dayton area, and there's been a couple of instances of this around the United States, but here in the Dayton area, there was a woman who put her baby in the microwave.
Jesus.
Oh, fuck me.
It was the first time that I heard a story of a mother's infanticide where I was not confronted with the challenge of humanizing the baby so that people would not have more sympathy for the mother than they did for the baby. And it was the fact that she callously attempted to accuse another one of her children of having done it and used, "I was so drunk I couldn't have done it," as an excuse. That was the last straw for people. Not the fact that no matter what happened in the household where she was the responsible adult, an infant was microwaved to death. That wasn't what set people off. It was that she didn't care that she had done it, that she wasn't remorseful, that she didn't sob for the cameras and look vulnerable. And it was just... that blew my mind, and it took me a long time to understand what was going on there.
Anything to excuse the behavior. Anything.
Oh, God, we just don't want to hold women accountable. And look at Jodi Arias, right? Right? She escaped the fucking death penalty, right? Which she fucking deserved. Like, how many times did she stab that guy and then cut his throat from ear to ear and then fucking shoot him in the head a couple times and all of that stuff?
She shot him first, and then she stabbed him over and over again while he was bleeding out and helpless.
Oh my God. And I'm like, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, I don't care what kind of fucking freaky BDSM relationship you might have had, right? There are domestic violence shelters that you can go to, right? If you are actually a victim of a controlling person, right? If you are actually a victim of, women have no go to. Women. Oh, she was not a victim, but that was the interveners, the women's shelters and all of the freaking women's feminist groups, right? All said that her expert witness said she was a victim of domestic violence, right? And all of that. But, there is a point where you have to take responsibility for yourself. And if there's help available, easily available, not available like it's available to a man, where if you're in Fort McMurray, right, and you go to a website for a women's shelter, and it's listed as a women's shelter because it's part of the Alberta network of women's shelters, and you go to their website and you look through and you read about all the women and children that they've helped, and then you just like are like, okay, well, maybe they can point me to someone who can help me, because maybe they're connected with other services, right? So I'll phone them, right? And then they tell you, okay, well, we can fly you from Fort McMurray all the way down to Strathmore, which is like freaking 100 kilometers east of Calgary, right? So we can put you on a plane and deliver you to the 2 beds available in the province for you, right? That exist, I don't know, 900 kilometers from where you live, right? We can give you that ticket. We can do that for you, or we can maybe give you a hotel voucher, right? That's what we can do, right? But only if you phone, and there's nothing on our website that's going to indicate that we can help you, so don't bother phoning, right? So we have this situation where women have all of this fucking help. They have all of this public sympathy. They have all of this public support. They have a $43 million fucking campaign to raise awareness in Ontario alone about sexual harassment and sexual violence and domestic violence against women, that was authorized by the former premier, she did such a poor job that when the Conservatives won in a landslide at the last election, her party, the Liberal Party, lost its official party status in Ontario. They don't have enough seats to keep official party status, but she authorized $43 million over 3 years to raise awareness for shit we already know. Hitting your wife is wrong. Hitting a girl is wrong. You know, being mean to women is wrong. All of this stuff is wrong, right? And let's do something about it. Let's walk a mile in her shoes. Let's donate to the YWCA. Let's donate to the White Ribbon Campaign. Let's tie a white ribbon around our old oak tree, right? Let's do all of these things, right? Because violence against women is wrong, and nobody knows it. Nobody knows it, even though the government's willing to funnel $43 million to nonprofit organizations to create TV advertisements and PSAs and billboards and shit, right? To raise awareness of this pressing issue, right? I'm blown away by this. I am blown away. Meanwhile, Cafe, right? Official nonprofit status. They are a charity, right? They do not take a political position. They did a fundraiser. They had to raise private funds. They had to raise private funds to open a shelter that would service male victims of domestic violence and their children in the Metro Toronto area. That will be the first domestic violence shelter servicing only men in Canada, other than the one that was opened by Earl Silverman, who opened one in his own home on his own dime, and then when he lost his house, killed himself.
Yeah.
And he was essentially bullied to death by feminists for that.
He wasn't just bullied to death by feminists. He was called a bully by feminists. After he died...
He was cry-bullied to death, basically.
Yep.
We started talking about his death, his suicide, right? And feminists came out of the fucking woodwork to say he was crazy, he was abusive, he was mean, he was awful. He couldn't figure out a way to work within the system. Well, I'm sitting here looking at a stack of 18 4-inch thick binders of his attempts to work within the system, right? That garnered him over the course of 20 years a single $800 grant from the government. System.
Well, you have to acknowledge, though, that being able to build anything on a dime is extremely impressive, considering how small a dime is.
There you go.
Oh my goodness, are we going into the puns?
Well, you gotta have puns. But the thing that really I want to get into, though, is what we're confronting here it's not just people have sympathy for women and people don't have sympathy for men. There is an underlying, the gynocentric attitude that people have. There are underlying instincts. There are underlying expectations that they don't realize, underlying biases, unconscious biases. Feminists like to talk about your unconscious biases, but they will not confront that one. And it's to the point where anytime you touch on it, you can watch this process. You can have a discussion.
I'd like to talk about an actual conversation.
Well, before you get in there, what I wanted to say is you can talk about all your way around the unconscious bias, right? You can talk about the issue itself. You can talk about the fact that men are affected by the issue too. You can talk about the fact that there is maybe need for reform to pull men up where women are in terms of services or recourse in the case of victimizations, different types of victimizations. You can talk about the benefits of father involvement to their children, the importance of bodily autonomy and things like that. You can even, there are anti-circumcision feminists, there are intactivist feminists and everything. But the moment that you challenge the idea that women have it worse, the moment that you challenge the idea that women are morally more valuable and morally superior, more morally competent than men, and that men are more dangerous and more physically competent than women, the moment you start challenging those underlying biases, there is a distinct change to the way the person will converse with you, and there is a distinct indicator of fear there. They will not admit to it. They will not openly say, I don't want to talk about that, I'm scared of it. But all of a sudden, the conversation goes sideways.
Yeah, they have.
Well, I'm going to let Karn talk because he was going to jump in. That's your cue, Karn. You can talk about the conversation you wanted to talk about, and then I'll give Lauren a chance.
Okay, so I had this actual conversation with my biological mother, who Hannah has actually met, if you remember.
Yes.
She kept waking up Mad Cat. So we were, I was telling her like these stories of all these women cutting off men's penises, and the thing in Thailand where a woman ties it to a balloon and sails off because she thinks he's cheating on him. And she giggled at that. And she goes, well, you have to understand, women get really, really mad. And before she went ... I said, oh, you mean like your first husband when he slammed you on the back of a car, knocking you unconscious? Kind of drilled in the little point there that just because you're mad doesn't justify your actions.
What was her response?
Nothing. I think it just took a long time to get into her head, and I don't think she ever really had a response to that.
See, that's one of the things that I run up against. Among other things, I had a woman that I was talking to on Twitter, was basically minimizing the idea of false rape allegations. And I confronted her with a case of a man who died in prison, who the Innocence Project was working with him to prove his innocence. They had the evidence they needed. They just needed to get through the system. And it takes time. It's not the wheels of justice turn very slowly. And he died in prison, knowing that he was innocent, with them knowing that he was innocent, with the people involved knowing that he was innocent, and not being able to do anything about it. And, I asked her, what would you tell this guy about the lack of importance of the false allegation phenomenon based on it being rare? She sort of dodged,
Yeah.
She sort of went sideways. And that's what I'm watching. But Lauren was going to pop in, and then I'll shut up and let Karen talk after Lauren.
Well, okay, just give me 1 second. You know what I always suggest to those people is shoplifting is a lot more common than murder. So obviously it's a more serious problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say that, it's just, you can clearly see how people will just fight tooth and nail to defend women, even when it is proven that they are at fault, and absolutely in the wrong. But it's a woman, so there could be nothing that she didn't done wrong, right?
Well, one thing too, right? Even just going back to the Liam Neeson thing, right? There are parallels within the criminal justice system, right? There are prosecutors who get a hard on for a particular suspect, and because he fits whatever description or whatever, and he or she, right? Decides that this is the person that I'm going to pursue, and I'm going to pursue this. I'm maybe even going to bend the rules. I'm going to, withhold evidence. I'm going exculpatory evidence. I'm going to maybe even destroy evidence. Mary Kellett, actually, she was disciplined by the main bar association, right, in Bar Harbor. And she, for what she did to Vladek Filler on behalf of his ex-wife, Lygia. But when you actually look at the whole thing, right, this is a woman who had a record of domestic violence and sexual assault cases that was the ratio of cases, the number of cases she took on in those two areas were 40 times higher than any prosecutor in the area. So you're looking at somebody who's got a real axe to grind against men. And she just absolutely would not drop the case. And it didn't matter how Lygia committed multiple felonies, including uttering threats to police officers that were recorded, who attempted kidnapping of her own children. Didn't even matter that the family court judge, right, in their divorce, even though there was a rape and a domestic violence charge pending against Vladek, gave him custody of the children because his wife was so fucking insane. Okay? They gave him sole custody, and they gave her supervised visitation. And while he was in jail awaiting trial and his children were in care, right, she attempted to kidnap them twice. Right? Okay, we're talking a completely fucking fucked up scenario, right? And this woman, she pursued it to the last fucking possible moment she could. She ordered police to destroy evidence. She ordered police to withhold evidence. She withheld evidence herself.
She coached the victim. She coached the accuser to lie. She didn't coach Vladek. She coached the accuser to look more like a victim.
That you need to cry more on the stand, right? If you're going to be convincing, right? And she did all of this shit, and it's all on the fucking record. And you know what she got? She got 2 weeks suspension from practicing law as a DA, suspended.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah. So literally behave for 2 weeks, and then as long as you behave for 2 weeks, then you're fine, and you can keep practicing for those 2 weeks as long as you behave, and
you can go back to railroading men as usual.
Yeah, and what did Vladek get? I think he got a couple of weeks in prison because he ended up finally fucking deciding to, okay, I'll plead guilty to bruising her arm. Right? I'll plead guilty to grabbing hold of her arm at some point, right? Misdemeanor domestic assault, right? Served 2 weeks in addition to all of the time he served awaiting trial, right? And Lygia, nothing. She was on tape, essentially telling the cops, because she was picked up by the cops naked, naked, wandering around the neighborhood, screaming profanities and threats at everybody, right? And so the police went and picked her up and put her in the freaking back of a squad car. And what did she do then? She said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to get my brothers to kill you, right? I'm going to get my brothers to help me with it. We're going to cut you into little pieces. We're going to put you in bags, and we're going to put you where no one is ever going to find you, and no one will ever know where your body is. That's what I'm going to do. Blah, 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 right? Like completely fucking psycho woman, right? You know what she got? Nothing. Not even an involuntary commitment to a mental institution.
And can you
Not
imagine a man saying that and not getting committed to an institution? Like, a man couldn't say that away from police. Couldn't say that, just be accused to police of having said that to somebody else and not have some repercussion just from the accusation. They would be at least taking him in for evaluation. And she had nothing. But the difference, and the difference there is, in attitudes, again, people minimize when women do it. People will shy away from looking at women as potentially immoral or potentially dangerous beings.
I just want to say as well, right? Vladik is a friend of mine. I know him quite well. He's an absolute sweetie. He's a really good father. He's very passionate about men's rights issues. And I did spend a night in bed with him in Toronto during the Miles Groth and talk and the rally for men's rights that Paul Elam attended. And Suzanne McCarley and Jeff from Cafe and Vladik and I were out drinking, and we ended up going to Vladik's hotel room, and there were 2 beds, and of course we were like, okay, so it's going to be girl, girl, boy, boy, right? And the guys were like, no. And so I was like, okay, I'll take Vladik. Suze, you take Jeff, and we'll just share the beds. And because we were all too drunk at that point to stagger our way back to wherever the hell we were staying. And, despite the fact that I woke up with a foggy memory and a sore vagina, Vladik was a perfect gentleman. No, I'm just saying, he was, I slept in the same bed with him, and he did nothing. Like there was nothing untoward. And I know he likes me. I know he's fond of me. And it's just like, oh my God, he's just a sweetie. He's such a kind person.
This person that was described in the court case as this,
horrible,
predatory, abusive monster. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like I trusted him to sleep next to me in a bed with 2 people who were so drunk they probably wouldn't have woken up if a car had crashed into the freaking room. Right? So, and nothing happened. He was a perfect gentleman. He's a sweetie.
Yeah, so for anybody that doubts the innocence, there's at least that evidence. But the fact is, he's on the list, his state's list. It's Maine, isn't it? Of exonerations. He was exonerated.
Yes.
So it's not just, it's documented. He was
eventually
proved innocent. Yeah, eventually
exonerated. Yeah.
But the fact is, he was exonerated. So he's not just innocent. He was proved innocent.
But he had to fight a 4-year fucking battle after his conviction.
Right.
He had to fight a 4-year battle to actually have that
happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's uphill from there too. I'm gonna get us into the super chats because we have a lot of them. And they go all the way back to the beginning of the show. So Polaris589 gave us $5 and said, "Roomy vagina? How roomy? Can I play VR in one?" So that's obviously that's vagina relay he's talking about. But yeah, it depends. It depends on the size of the feminist. Mighty Balzac gave us $2 Australian and said, in the midst of Karen describing her episiotomy issues. Karen, please stop with the hot sexy talk.
I did not
you
have
didn't have an episiotomy. No, you had nature's
I
episiotomy.
Yeah, nature's episiotomy. Yeah.
Mr. Robot, and then feminists call episiotomy birth rape. Actually, they would call my emergency C-section birth rape too, so they don't know what the hell they're talking about, because my son and I would have died if we hadn't done that. Mr. Roboto gave us...
Do you know how many strange people that I had never met before and I was not on a first name basis of them, shoved their fingers up my vagina while I was in labor? Yeah, lots.
Yeah. Lots. But,
yeah, you guys are really, really convincing me that having a baby is a good idea.
Making it sound like fun, aren't we?
It's great. It's great.
Actually, the good part of it is that afterwards there's a baby.
Anyway, the great thing too is if you can actually, while you're actually pushing the baby out and the head's out and the shoulders maybe out, if you can like sort of sit up and actually look and see the baby coming out, that's pretty cool.
See, I didn't have that experience. I was not in any position to look at anything when I was giving birth. So, but in any case,
that's a virtual reality game that I never want to play.
Yeah. And just imagine being given a drug and that's when you find out you're allergic to it.
You know what?
Oh man,
I'm allergic to Pitocin.
Oh God.
I do like the idea of having a child. I do. Hell, I'm a female. I do.
You know what?
Have that nurturing.
You mean you have a mothering instinct?
You know what, Lauren?
Shocking that a woman would have a mothering instinct. I would not have imagined that.
Lauren, you know what I'm going to tell you is that it was excruciating. They were hearing me screaming out in the parking lot the first time, and I did it 2 more times, right? And that all is just blown away. When you literally, I was after I had my kids, right? Each of them, right? I was ready to within 20 minutes of having my first kid, I was out the door at a picnic table having a cigarette. Okay. I was just like, yeah, no, yeah. I need to go now. I've cuddled my kid. He's sleeping now. I'm going to go have a smoke. I'm going to come back in. With my daughter, it was like there was a woman who, when I went out to have a cigarette, and she said, "Did you hear that screaming? That woman screaming? What were they doing to her?" And I was like, "Oh shit, that was me." And I was having a baby, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm 14 weeks pregnant." And I was just like, don't freaking worry about it. It's actually really cool. This was literally 15 minutes ago. I'm riding high. I'm
but Karen,
on a freaking cloud now.
You are a tiger mom. You are a different fucking animal. Okay.
There you go.
If anyone,
I don't know. I thought this was just natural.
Yeah, well, that's what you did was natural.
For you.
Yes.
For you.
Well, anyway.
I don't think I'm going to have her watch this
episode. Oh, okay. Karin, your sound is just, it's going back and forth. I don't know what the problem is. It was really loud earlier. Now it's really quiet again. This is we're definitely going to have you.
I'll say it again. My fiance weighs less than 100 pounds. I don't think I'm going to have her watch this episode.
Yeah, my mom.
I was 5'8" and weighed 105 pounds when I weaned my first child because I was pregnant with my second. 5 months pregnant with my second and still losing weight.
My mom was 5'5". She's not that tall anymore, but she was 5'5" and less than 100 pounds when she got pregnant with my brother. He was 10 pounds.
Honestly.
So, in any case,
believe
it or not, the birth stories could go on forever, and there's a variety of experiences that happen. But for the most part, a lot of women make a big deal out of the negative aspects of the experience, the pain, the difficulty. It's called labor for a reason. It's very hard work. But every mammal does it. In fact, some of them give birth to multiple babies in one setting.
There is something.
Not every mammal.
Ours are. That's true. Every female mammal does it, but the other difference is we have bigger babies, individual babies, than most do.
Yeah, and we have smaller pelvises, but
right.
But what I would say is, like in terms of all of that, is that the going through the struggle makes the high afterwards even better, right? Like it's like you go through a struggle and then you come out the other side of it and it's like, oh my God, this is awesome, and here's this gorgeous little baby, right? This gorgeous little gift right at the end of it. So part of it is, I think we do make a big deal about how painful it is and all of that stuff, but part of that is the fact that you get through it and you get
sense
this
of joy
amazing fucking thing. And sometimes the more painful it is, the bigger the high at the end of it, in terms of
Yep.
Or you could just not and just enjoy waking up whenever the fuck you want.
Oh,
the other way.
You're
the other
gonna
way is
have a baby eventually, Lauren.
The other way is to become a parent without giving birth, which I have 2 stepdaughters, and I have my biological son. I have 2 stepdaughters, and I love all 3 of my children very much, and they're all very special to me, and it was a privilege to have the responsibility that I had in their lives. So I mean, there is that. There are people who adopt that are fabulous parents.
Listen, I would feel the same way if that was my situation. But
I know.
Already know. I am 40 years old. I am not having a child.
No.
How the fuck are you 40 years old?
You don't have to give birth at 40 years old.
How? No, I want to know how the fuck. Lauren,
that starts.
Black don't crack.
That starts with. There you go.
Black
that starts with
crack.
being born like 40 years ago, and then time passes, and at the end of it, you become 40 years old.
Right.
But going on with the super chats, because we still have a buttload of them. Then we have Mr. Roboto, who gave us $2 and said, okay, what have I missed? I came in at torn vagina. So we really had a long talk about torn. Hoki Bukisa gave us $4.99 and said, frowny face. Apollo the Leader gave us $2 and said, shocked face, green face, puke, faints at birth talk, or faints about birth talk. Mr. Roboto gave us another.
You might end up in the birthing room, Lamaze coaching your freaking partner.
You never know.
You never know, and it's a dirty business, and you never want to do it on something that you're not willing to throw it in the trash.
There you go. Mr. Roboto gave us another $2 and said, baby boxes exist. Circuit de Flora, Syria de Flora gave us $20 and said, a woman once told me about how her mom repeatedly tried to take her liver as a girl. I'm kind of curious how she was trying to get that liver out. Mom's reason was she gave birth to her and she has a right to her daughter's organs. Mom had liver cancer. How the hell do you get your daughter's liver unless you're trying to cut her open yourself?
Yeah.
That's a terrifying story. And I want to know more, just to get context. But holy shit.
After show. Yes, let's talk about that.
That's parental abuse right there. That's an abusive mother.
Well, there was a story a while back about a mother who kept trying these parents had a second child specifically so she could go through all these medical things to keep their first child alive because the first child had like cancer or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they went through like bone marrow stuff and all these other procedures, and this little girl got a lawyer I think she was like 9 or something, 8 or 9, and she took her parents to court.
Wow, at 9 years old.
Good for her.
Her mom was fighting tooth and nail to keep her first child alive, both of them girls, and they just since the child was like 3 years old, she'd been going to the hospital, donating blood and all this other tests for all these years. And she's like, no, I've had enough. So she walks into a lawyer's office and puts down like a bunch of points or something. So I want to hire you. And the lawyer's like, you can't. This won't even afford a second the time you've wasted so far. And she starts pushing the money back, and then she starts talking, and he's like, okay, you keep your money, but I'm going to.
You can keep your money, but I'm going to take the case.
Yeah, I don't know where I stand on the idea of a parent feeling like they own their children, because the child is their own. You are.
I own my fucking kids. Fuck you. I am she who must be obeyed. But like I have heard about people who have, they've had a kid who needed a bone marrow transplant, and there were no suitable donors, and so they decided to have another kid to take the bone marrow, right? And that just seems really weird. And I was just actually watching a show. It was like it's on YouTube about babies born with harlequin ichthyosis. And if you ever want to have your hair turn white overnight, Google that under Google Images.
Oh yeah, that's a horrible thing to have happen.
Harlequin ichthyosis, right? Yeah. But so you have these two. It's sort of 1 in a million births, right? But there's 2 couples in Britain who have, these who gave birth to these girls with harlequin ichthyosis, and when their daughters, their first daughters survived, right? And it's a horrendous freaking lifestyle that you have to practice to deal with this disorder. Most babies die very quickly, right? And if they survive, then it's a lifetime of, just a huge it's your entire life is dealing with the disorder. Right. And they were like, okay, we thought we had a 1 in 4 chance of, having another baby with this disorder because, you both have to have the gene. But we thought, we have a 3 in 4 chance of not having one. So let's go for it. And then they both ended up having a second daughter with harlequin ichthyosis. And it's just like, oh my fucking.
Why would you even take that chance? Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you do that? If you know you have a 1 in 4 chance, why wouldn't you go to a fertility clinic and have your embryos screened for it or something, like anything?
Yeah. Well, or simply not get pregnant again, and if you want another baby, adopt. There are situations
or get a sperm donor. Get a sperm donor who's not fucking dad wants to be dad. Like I'm one of those people. Like DNA isn't everything. I raised 2 stepsons, right? DNA is not everything. But go and get a donor egg. Get a donor egg and your husband's sperm, or use your own egg and use donor sperm. Something.
Yeah. Yeah.
The oldest woman to give birth was 72.
Sorry, what?
The oldest woman to give birth was 72. Is that what you said?
That's another one. I knew when I was younger, if I hit 35 without getting pregnant ever, I was going to get my tubes tied at 35. Because I wasn't going to, after 35, the risks, if it's your first baby, the risks of you basically your baby suffering an injury, or having incomplete DNA from you, not from the husband, but from the mother, having an egg contribute to the creation of the baby that is incomplete or that has genetic problems. so that they will have some sort of disability that they would not have had if you had given birth to them years earlier with a different egg as the contributing DNA from you. And it seemed to me to be irresponsible and selfish if I were to make that my decision, like after 35, put my future child through that risk just so that I could have the experience of being a mommy. I wasn't willing to do that. I was willing to adopt after 35. I was willing to become a stepmom after 35, but not to give birth to my first child after 35. And it's specific. If you have had children, for some reason that makes a difference. I do not know exactly why. But
it does.
It's not as bad now as it was either. There's been some things that they've figured out, I guess, about the gestation process that help women who are in that situation. Just like all the things they figured out about nutrition that have helped to prevent things like spina bifida and other preventable birth defects.
Folic acid, lots and lots of folic acid.
But there's a window. You have to be within, don't have too little and don't have too much. It's like a lot of other nutrients. You can overdose. You can. It takes a lot to overdose, but you can take too much too. But yeah.
With me, it was essentially I wanted to have my kids when I was young enough to enjoy them and have the energy to look after them. And it wasn't so much about having a baby at age 35. It was about having a 15-year-old at age 50, right? That was really, and Sam, my youngest, he was an oops, right? We call him the sponge baby because he got through a contraceptive sponge.
Surprise.
Yeah. And, but, and I didn't even know I was pregnant until I was 16 weeks along. So I essentially had this kid he's like probably, when I looked at it, like I would never have considered an abortion, even if I had discovered the pregnancy earlier. But when I look at him and I think, this is my one normal kid, my one kid who can make any kind of claim to normalcy. But he's also, he's somebody that I'm proud of, and I would never, ever, ever. Every time people ask me, if you could do it all over again, would you get with your first husband? And I say yes, because I have these 3 children, right? And I'm proud of them all in different ways. But I have them, and I wouldn't have them if I hadn't been with that particular man. And when I think about, the whole sequence of events that led to their births, right? And I think about, if my grandparents had had sex in a different position the night that they gave birth to my mother, the night that they conceived my mother would not be my mother. My mother would be somebody different, right? And I consider that entire sort of cosmic lottery that we've all won. And, there's an argument to be made in terms of the sanctity of life, right? And, arguments against suicide, arguments against abortion, arguments against all of those things that can be found just in that. It took an innumerable, inconceivable number of successful iterations of reproduction, right? That resulted in you. And
well, it was somewhat conceivable then.
If any one of them had been different, you would not exist.
Yeah. And yeah, that is one consideration when discussing those issues. The wonder of it is an important thing to never lose sight of. But at the other end of it, I guess my position on life like that is you plan as best you can. You are responsible for doing your best to make responsible choices from the get-go. And if something that you didn't plan for happens, if your choices do not lead to an outcome that you wanted, or that lead to a different, they lead to an outcome that you planned for later instead of right now, things like that, you do your best to make the best of it for yourself and your family. But that's another one of those issues that people cannot confront.
So,
the demonization factor kicks in at both ends of that. Either you're a bad person for valuing life because you're not valuing women's bodily autonomy, or you're a bad person for valuing women's ability to make responsible choices and holding them accountable for doing so, because you don't care about life and you don't care about women's bodily autonomy.
There you go.
So
there you go.
What you're telling me is I need to get my fiance pregnant as soon as possible.
No.
Get right on that.
There we go.
Okay,
No. Fiance is not the right word to use in that sentence.
Karin, how old is your fiance?
Hold on. She's like 33 now, and she's never been
fuck
child,
yeah!
so,
No, get on that.
Marry first, if you're gonna do it.
Well, we only have 90 days to get married when she finally gets out here, so it's not like.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to have kids, you need to actually get on that, because it is like there are issues in terms of complications and stuff like that can happen, and it can be very hard.
Yeah.
For it, it's not just about the complications; it's about the ability to get pregnant after a certain age if you have never been pregnant before, or if you have been
medical
pregnant
issues.
Right.
Yeah.
There's medical issues, but the thing is, it's still something to approach with careful planning. And this is like I don't usually advise men to get married in the first place, right? I usually advise men to be very careful, vet character. I know you've already done all of that, but at the other end of it, it's a different story if you are going to have children together. That marriage is your promise to the rest of the world that you are going to have a stable relationship. And right now, it's the only thing we've got, and it creates legal connections between yourself, your partner, and your children you have to have.
Any paternal rights to your child that you will be given by default will come through marriage.
Oh yeah, Ohio really sucks about that. In fact, Ohio is terrible about that. If you get a woman pregnant, she gets pregnant and doesn't tell you. Like, she has sex with you, she absorbs your sperm, she gets pregnant, she doesn't say a word. You haven't signed up for the putative father registry. She gives birth. She has all of the cards now. She doesn't have to give you any notice. She's not a kidnapper if she doesn't ever recognize your parental rights because you weren't married. She doesn't have to allow you any time with your child. She doesn't have to treat you like a father at all. But if she decides that she wants to treat your wallet like a father's wallet, she gets all of the benefit of you being the father in the court.
Wait a minute. Wait. What you said this. What is a punitive father's registry?
Putative. P-U-T. Yeah, not P-U-N. P-U-T. Putative father's registry is when you go to the state and you basically say, I've been having sex with this woman. If she gets pregnant, it's probably mine. And then then if she cheats on you and has another guy's baby, you might be on the hook until the state can determine whether you're the father or not. Now, the only good thing Ohio does is they will not assign a child support obligation without a paternity test and a maternity test, of all things. So yeah, you got to prove you're the mommy too.
That's good.
Yeah, but they won't. But they'll still go after a guy who has said, "I'm probably the father."
Well, with the putative father's registry, because it doesn't even matter whether you put yourself on the putative father's registry. the state will go after you if she names you as the father.
That's
right?
true as well.
Yeah, so you like that's not opening you up to any more liability than you already are open to.
And then, you have this situation where if you refuse a paternity test, that's an admission that you're the father.
Yeah, but you have to apply in court to actually have a paternity test, and she can fight you and resist that.
Not in Ohio.
Not in Ohio?
No,
Oh,
not in Ohio. You can basically say, I want proof.
Yeah.
And like if she goes on welfare and welfare goes after you for being the father, and because welfare will go after you for child support, they will do a paternity test and a maternity test.
This is why I really support DNA testing, mandatory DNA testing at every live birth. And
I do not, and here is why.
I
don't support the violation of privacy. I think that should be voluntary. I think both parents should have the right to say no.
Yeah, but
I think the individual has the right to say no too. So if we're going to be on the stance that you can't cut a man or a boy right at birth because it's his body, his choice, you don't have the right to take my DNA out of my body without my choice either, no matter what age I am, right? Unless someone's making a medical decision for me that I myself can't make, right? Like if I'm like 2 years old and I have leukemia or something, right?
I would support a law that says a child's DNA for paternity test cannot be used for anything else. It has the information has to be limited to whether or not the father is the father, and the actual DNA has to be discarded. The material has to be discarded, and the information cannot be shared outside of the need to know connections basically within the system.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be I would be all for that. But the other thing is I would also be all for a law that would completely abolish the child support system. I think it's worthless.
Yes, exactly. If we have to come to a consensus. What the fuck are we gonna do? We have a situation where men are just, it doesn't matter what they do not have a choice over whether they are going to be a father or not. So how do we alleviate that situation? Do we just separate their financial responsibility from parenthood, which I, again, also fully support? Or do we force, and I don't want to say force, but do we dictate that at live birth that the father is actually the fucking father?
Well, here's the thing. In terms of child support, it's my initial position on this has always been the men's rights position. A father has a right to the same bodily autonomy that a mother has, and a mother has the legal right to put her child up for adoption, to use safe haven abandonment. She didn't have to get pregnant in the first place, and on top of all of that, even though I'm against abortion, and I think it's a stupid choice, she has that choice.
Yeah.
So she has multiple outs. The father deserves one. At least one. It is not beneficial to the child to force a father into the child's life. It causes resentment. It can lead to psychological abuse. It can lead to a lifetime of disappointment when a father tries to live up to everybody else's standards and doesn't. Right?
Right.
Well, there's more. There's more. There's more. You guys got to listen to the rest of this. The other thing about this is, I researched this. The government spends more money taking in child support than it recovers. So all of this crap about, well, you're just going to make the government responsible for all these single moms is bullshit, because the government is still being financially responsible for all these single moms. They are not recovering enough money because most of the men they're going after are under the poverty level or are in low enough income situations that they're not they're not able to pay high amounts of child support. The state, if the mother is on welfare, the state keeps the payments. She doesn't get the welfare and the payments. So she's still living in poverty. Her situation doesn't improve because she's living on the government dole. So all we end up doing is putting men into poverty without alleviating the mother's poverty and without alleviating the burden on the taxpayer. That is useless, right? So that system has no value, in my opinion. Women and men who have babies together can work together and work out a system of, here's going to be our custody arrangement, here's going to be our child support arrangement, here's the contract we're going to make. And if you violate it, you're in breach of contract, and breach of contract is what covers the violation. And we can put into this contract, if one side violates the contract, the other side gets custody of the children. And that will keep people honest. And that's all that's really needed in most cases. But no, we get into this discussion with people, and the first thing that you start hearing is, well, it's for the good of the children, it's all about the children, it's for the benefit of the children, it's for the protection of the children. And there's that thought terminating wall, that concept that you can't look past, the idea that, hey, this isn't working.
Right. All you are doing is selling your children to the government.
Pretty much.
All the government's doing is incentivizing women to have children without getting a commitment from men to father those children.
Right. But it's not even that. It's the government is incentivizing women to have children and discard the fathers.
Yeah.
So that the government can then reap the benefits, because, for every child that is put on, I don't know if it's every child or every father that's put on child support, the government gets a kickback from that as well.
Every dollar collected.
The state gets a kickback from the federal government.
Kickback from the federal government. Yeah.
Yep, the state gets a kickback from the federal government. Yeah, that is true.
And there's no money in enforcing access. That's the real kicker here.
Well, there's jobs. That's the thing.
Okay, but there's no money in it, right? It really is all red tape. None of those jobs have any kind of subsidy from the federal government. So the police officers who have to actually go to a woman's house and say, you really actually have to hand your children over to their dad this weekend. Those police officers aren't being subsidized by the federal government. That's police officers.
Yeah, you're talking about custody access, not
access.
Yeah.
Access, right? So you're looking at a situation where access and child support have been decoupled under the law. Right? That's true in Canada. It's true in the United States. A man can't say, well, I'm not going to pay you child support unless you give me access. That's no longer allowed. That's been disallowed for years, right? And you have a system where the system can recoup some of its costs when it enforces child support. Some, all, perhaps even more of its costs, depending on the state, I'm guessing. Right? Well, when it goes after child support because of those federal kickbacks, but there are no federal kickbacks in terms of enforcing access, right?
It's not that they're recouping their costs, though. They're feeding the beast, the government monster. They're feeding their infrastructure, and it's the administrators that are going for this. They're not. It's about money, but it's not about money in the way you're thinking. It's about maintaining a government structure that they can continue to demand money from the public for to feed.
Only because they get those kickbacks from the federal government. Right? And so essentially that's Title 4D or something like that.
Right. Title 4D.
Yeah. So essentially what you have is a system where, and they do recoup some of their costs because, here in Canada, like my sister went on welfare for a year, And she had 2 kids, and she was collecting child support for those 2 kids. And every fucking dime of child support she collected was deducted off of her welfare check. Every single dime.
Yeah, they're basically, but they're basically not recouping the cost of collecting child support. They're recouping the cost of welfare, but then they're spending more money collecting the child support than they recoup. That's what I was pointing out. The cost of paying for the system that they use, and that's the whole goal, is to create the need for that system and those employees that they can then turn around and say, well, we need taxpayer funding for this system, or these poor women and their poor children will be without their child support. It's a scam. It's a massive scam.
What the fuck is a welfare state for? It's to pay for women and their children, right? So, like, why do we need to have anybody but the government furnishing that check? And if he's only capable of paying $300 a month in child support, and that $300 a month is deducted off of her welfare check, then she's no further ahead than if she was just on fucking welfare. So if you're gonna give her that, then just fucking give it to her. Jesus fuck.
Yeah, no, the whole system, the whole point of the system is to perpetuate the system. It's not for the people in any way, shape, or form. But in any case, we're going to go on with more super chats. That's another one of those boogeymen in the closet, though, that's very hard for people to confront, and they really cannot deal with the fact that... Well, they really cannot deal with the fact that there is not this easy government-provided solution to the issue of poverty and suffering in our society. It's people feel very bad about other people's losses and lack of resources and everything, and they want a relief from that concern for other people. They don't want to feel like they have more than other people and they're better off than other people wrongfully. There's a guilt, a survivor's guilt that goes along with that. And when they look at the welfare system, they're not looking at the welfare system as a grand solution to this problem of poverty. They're looking at the welfare system as, I don't have to feel bad about this because we have welfare. And that's really hard to confront in conversations with people about single moms and choices and child support and all of that. But going on, we have Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and said, Karen speaks of the predator princess paradox. Now, it was a discussion, I believe, about not wanting to view women as being able to be as being the kind of moral agents that can be wrong and bad like men can. People can't look at women that way. Tyler Preston gave us $2 and said, Thanos was right. Humans are truly despicable. And there are many ways in which that is true, and many people that make it so. But there's a lot of great people out there.
Every time my boyfriend complains about how the people around him behave and how they're unaware of their baser instincts and how those are guiding their actions and their thoughts and feelings, I just tell him, just imagine 2 groups of chimpanzees whooping and beating their chests and throwing smartphones at each other. And I shamelessly stole that metaphor off of Alison.
Anytime that you are dealing with the issues that we're dealing with, talking about and everything, and you start to lose faith in humanity, go find one of Tom Golden's videos and listen to him talk about men, and you'll feel better, guaranteed. Because
or just go and
read his blog.
Go and look at any video called Everyday Heroes or something like that, right? Because it's like everything from like helping a babushka across the street to like fixing somebody's rear view mirror while you're in traffic, like all of these like small acts of kindness. Almost all of them are men. Almost all of them.
Goodfella had a great one. Hurricane Sandy blew all the useful women away. That's what it was. Hurricane Sandy blew all the useful women away. And it's just image after image after image of men rescuing people from the flood and cleaning up and men rescuing animals and rebuilding and all this stuff. It's a great video. It's kind of funny because it's a feel good video, but it makes the point. Who does this stuff? Who are the people who come to the rescue, who basically give a shit what happens to everybody else instead of putting themselves first in a disaster, in a situation where there's something awful that's happened, and there are people in terrible situations, and there's adversity to face to get them out of those situations. It's men.
Right.
Men are the ones that face the danger and the discomfort and the dirt and the just men are the heroes.
Yeah, because we have been socialized, and not only because we've been socialized. I mean, it's just because men, I think, are the natural responders in situations like that. But we've been socialized that women and children first are the ones to be protected.
All of those are biological in origin, right?
Yeah.
Like men are more likely to do those things, and women are more likely to put women and children, like, prioritize them, right? But just biologically, and I think society in general biologically is willing to do that and prepared to do that. But at the same time, we have, there are expectations on men to do those kinds of things, and there are no expectations on women. You hear the occasional story of the heroic woman who lifted a tractor off of her child or something because she was so pumped full of adrenaline that she was able to lift a huge, massive piece of equipment, and
because it was her child.
Yeah, well, I've been in that position before, and one of the most amazing things, because like that time really slowed down when there were those two boys being pulled out away from shore off the coast of Cuba, right? And I was the only one there who could actually do anything. But one of the things that passed through my head, because one of them was my son and the other was my nephew, right? And my son was 14 and my nephew was 12. And once I realized that actually they were in trouble and they were paddling like mad toward the shore but moving further away out toward the sea. Once I realized that, this thing went through my head, right? What if I can only save one of them? What if I can only grab one of them? And I was like, I'm going to have to grab my nephew because I'll never be able to look my sister in the eye ever again if I save my son at the expense of her son. It's just not going to, especially since my son is like 14 and her son is 12, right? He's more vulnerable. He's younger. He's less strong, right? So what if I can only save one of them? And thankfully for me, I didn't have to make that choice because I could grab one. I grabbed each of their arms in one hand and then struggled for about 15, 20 minutes to get to the point where we could stand up in waist deep water without the bottom of the sand disintegrating under our feet. And puked up a stomach full of seawater and looked down at my $128 bikini top that my sister bought for me because she's just that wonderful. She's wealthy, and took me shopping and looked down at it and thought, oh God, they're both still in there. I was a G34 at the time, by the way. So that was it takes quite the amount of architecture to do that. And I was like, oh, wow, they're still where they belong. That's fucking amazing. That was $128 well spent, right? But there was that moment when I was just like, fuck, am I going to have to like sacrifice my son to save my nephew so I can like not look like I was selfish? Like, how does the social metrics, how do the social metrics work out in this situation? Like, how am I going to do this? It's the same with a friend of mine said, like, I have an airbag in the front seat, and when I'm driving a bunch of kids and, other people's kids in my car, I put my own kid in the front seat. I don't put somebody else's kid in the front seat, because that's not my kid, right? And as long as I'm driving and I'm the one taking the risks, I'm risking my kid.
And there is that degree of socialization where there's a sense of shame associated with putting yourself and your interests first. And I'm not sure if it's entirely socialized or not either. We are an altruistic species to a degree. Yeah. And I think there's some of that's instinct as well, but it's kind of hard to explore that because people do get
really upset.
Yeah, really it's something that people will shy. They'll be very uncomfortable discussing it. See, my experience of that was I was on my way home from something, and I started hearing a moment by moment newscast that was taking place in the midst of information coming out about a school shooting in progress, and it was a local broadcast, and they didn't say what school, and it was a school day, and my son was at school, and I usually am a pretty careful driver. I drove home about 15 miles an hour over the speed limit through town because I couldn't find out from the radio what school that was happening to. And I get on the internet and I'm looking for information on this school shooting to find out, and I couldn't go to the school because I knew if there was something going on, I wouldn't be able to get in. And my home was in between where I was and where the school was. And the fastest way for me to get that information was at home. First thing I saw was that it was in Washington State. And I had this progression of, first there was this sense of deep relief. It wasn't happening here, right? And it wasn't happening to my son's school, and my son wasn't in danger. And then it hit me that I was relieved that something terrible had just happened to somebody else's children. And then I saw Anita Sarkeesian tweeting about it and wrote a very angry article.
Oh
my fucking God, that was like but that moment of I was relieved that something terrible happened to somebody else's child and not mine.
Oh yeah, no,
that is like a dark feeling, and realizing that you had that feeling, and then there's a guilt that goes with that, and it is a very uncomfortable thing to address.
They made a whole movie about it called Sophie's Choice.
I can't even watch that. I learned about that movie when I was in high school, and I had nightmares ever since. I didn't even watch the movie, and I've had nightmares ever since.
I haven't watched it, and I won't watch it because it is just too excruciating to think about. Like, I mean, like I'll watch movies for the cry factor, right? Like when I'm in the anger phase of my menstrual cycle, right? I'll watch Gladiator because I like the fight scenes. And when I'm in the weepy phase of my menstrual cycle, I'll watch Gladiator because of the scenes of him being reunited with his wife and his child.
But not Sophie's Choice.
Elysian Fields and all of that stuff, right? And all of those things, his friends dying and the whole bit, right? I totally love that emotional, that cathartic thing where you just like sort of really bond with a movie. And even just watching, like I said, one of my favorite movies, Last of the Mohicans. Another one was, oddly enough, it was critically panned, The 13th Warrior, right? that those movies, right, like really strike at something visceral in me, right? But I won't watch Sophie's Choice because I don't want, like, I have read books and reread them that had me crying for the last freaking 100 pages of the book, right? But I will not watch Sophie's Choice.
No, in fact, just having been told the basic plot of the movie, in which, and this is for the people that don't know, because we got somebody asking, Tyler Preston is asking, what's Sophie's Choice? That was, to my understanding, that was a movie about a woman who
was like
a prisoner of the Nazis.
Germany.
And they forced her to choose which of her children would live and which of her children would die. And the movie was essentially the aftermath of that.
Which one, she had a son and a daughter, and which one is going to get put on the train out of the country, right? And which one is going to get put on with you, right? And which one is going to get put on the train to the death camps, right? And I think she chose her son to go with her and her daughter. And this is one of the interesting things about that movie, is that she actually realized that her son would be more likely to die if he went to the death camps than her daughter would be, right? Her daughter might have some way, right?
Some chance at survival.
Whether it's being non-threatening or whether it's using her sexuality or, whatever, right? Her daughter might have some way to survive that situation, right? Or somebody might take pity on her and rescue her, right? So she chose her daughter to go to the death camp, and she chose her son to come with her because she knew that her son would not engender any pity from anyone
because he was a boy.
So, because he was a boy. So essentially, I mean, like this, actually, we should do a freaking, oh God, that would entail me watching it.
Yeah. If we need to, we need to. But honestly, that is one of those, remember, like I've said, there are concepts that we recoil from because they are terrifying or because they are gut-wrenching. This is one that's gut-wrenching. And the idea of that degree of human evil and the terrifying,
too.
Yeah, the gut-wrenching end of it is being faced with such a situation. The terrifying end of it is being the person that chooses somebody else's death.
Yeah,
and you don't want to ever be in that situation.
Your own child. Well, and then on top of that, right? When I think about it, right? Like, because most people probably, instinctively, right? And this is why I think this is a movie that we should maybe actually take a deeper look at. Even though I don't want to watch it, and I never want to watch it, and it gives me hives just to think about it. But the fact that she chose her son over her daughter, right? When everybody would really generally expect that she would choose to take her daughter with her, right? And send her son because her son is capable and self-determining and strong and competent and like that's what men are.
Yeah.
And maybe able to save himself, right? The fact that she chose to take her son with her and send her daughter off on that train actually really makes a deep statement. It's a very red pill statement.
Yeah, it really is. But it's definitely a topic for another show. Because we're at almost 9:30 now. And I still have super chats to go through, and I better get to them. But that is one of those, it's just hard to confront. So in any case, we're going to, I've lost my spot again. After Thanos, we have Hoki Bukisa. Hoki Bukisa gave us $4.99 and said, maybe if we started crucifying these child murderers with extreme prejudice, they'd start thinking twice about it. Sympathy is just enabling them. And that's kind of a knee-jerk response that people have. It's very hard to examine the idea of people doing terrible things and still see the wrongdoer as human, and still recognize that our response has to be a response to a human being, even if what they did was inhuman. And that has allowed, throughout history, that has allowed otherwise perfectly normal people to become inhuman themselves, to behave inhumanely toward other human beings on the basis of judgment. And I think that is probably one of the hardest things to get people to confront. To be able to separate the recognition that what someone has done is horrible, horrifying, and inhumane, without, to separate that from whether or not that individual is a person, and what changes take place in ourselves when we stop recognizing that. That's another tough one. Tyler Preston gave us $5 and said Christy Winters would say, but my patriarchy has forced women to always be docile and never get angry at men. They snapped under pressure. Poor women. And that's one of the excuses I hear really often. Women don't fight back. Hell yes, they do. Albert Nada gave us $5 Canadian. Said feminists try to keep Karla Homolka out of jail by claiming she was a victim of domestic violence. Susan G. Cole said she regretted it. Was that the case that invented battered woman syndrome?
Yeah, no, that was a really horrific case. It was Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka found each other. They were two sociopaths who found each other.
Oh God, that's a bad mix.
Yeah, and then the first murder that they committed, that was a rape and murder of her younger sister, teenage sister.
Okay, I knew that case.
Yeah, and they filmed it, they videotaped it, and then they videotaped them raping and murdering other young teenagers. And then, well, here's the thing. They had these VHS tapes stashed in the house, right? Like underneath the TV. But nobody bothered to look at them. So until after she had signed a plea deal, right? She had signed a plea deal at the behest of the governor, Attorney General of Ontario, right? Who was a raging feminist, right? That she had been coerced into these acts by her abusive husband, Paul Bernardo, and she was going to give she was going to give evidence against him. In exchange for this cushy 12-year sentence for, not first-degree murder. And so essentially, then, so the Attorney General pushed for this plea deal because of this feminist agenda, right? Saying, well, this is the perfect case to highlight battered women syndrome, right? She was under his spell. She had Stockholm syndrome. She was like, she was enthralled to him, and that's why she did it. And, because he beat her all the time, right? And so they signed the deal, and then like a day or two later, the police actually watched these fucking tapes and were like, holy fuck, this bitch is just as into it as this guy is, right? Like she's just as freaking, she's participating, she's just as into it as her husband is, including with her sister. And but then there was nothing they could do because they'd signed the deal.
And they couldn't possibly.
Now she's living in Quebec with her doctor husband and her children. And the people who are upset about her kids attending school with their kids are being accused of harassment.
Oh, geez. I would be more worried about the kids themselves. Like, what she did, and now she's got kids under her control. And now what she did, it should indicate at least that she is too dangerous to be around children. Like, who's to say she's not going to do it to her own children? If she did it to her sister...
Yeah.
Gee.
Well, it may well be one of these situations where it's just two people find each other and feed off each other. I think that the Columbine killers probably were that, right? That probably if they hadn't found each other, neither of them would have done anything like that. But they found each other and they kind of went into this weird psychotic spiral.
Well, there were other factors involved, including selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which seem to be present in a disturbing number of school shootings and other similar attacks by young men and young women, actually. But when you take somebody that has a psychological issue that is causing them to have violent tendencies or any kind of intrusive, destructive thought pattern, and you just throw pills at them and you don't do the things that are needed in order to get them out of that pattern, you have created the perfect formula for an outburst.
Yeah, exactly. The lack of the lack of any kind of sense of urgency towards men's mental health or mental health in general. We just don't talk about it.
Oh, we talk about it all the time. It's actually the most commonly brought up topic after an incident like this, and there are initiatives after initiatives after initiatives, but they all point back to, well, let's just throw these pills at these kids and everything will be okay.
Right.
That's useless.
Right. Exactly.
So what they won't talk about is how many of these kids have been prescribed these meds as a substitute for the mentoring that they have lost because they are in homes where they do not have a father. How many of these kids are in a situation where these pills are being substituted for adult mentoring and that involves a discipline process that is tailored to the child's needs and not, a zero tolerance policy in their school.
Well, you know what frustrates me too is because there's evidence that ADHD is it's an adaptation. It's not a disorder. It's actually an evolved adaptation that is more common and is correlated with more positive health outcomes among nomadic peoples.
Well, and that's the when they give the stimulants, Ritalin and stuff like that.
We're looking at the genes
Right.
that are associated with ADHD, right? When you actually look at the DNA, you find that even in identical populations that intermarry, but one has settled down into permanent settlements over the last 50 years and the other is still nomadic, you see poor health outcomes in the sedentary population and positive health outcomes in the nomadic population. So what you're looking at is something that isn't even a fucking disorder.
Yeah, that's well, and the thing that I was worried about, like, one of the things that they do is sort of push the diagnosis on kids who are more curious or more inquisitive than other kids. Kids who are higher energy than other kids. They don't necessarily have ADHD. In fact, like South Park did an episode on this, and I will never forget the part where they're standing in the pharmacy waiting to get their drugs, and the mothers are talking about how great it is that they have these medications, and one of them says to the other, that her kid, before the medication, her kid was running around acting like a little 8-year-old, and the kid pipes up, "Mom, I am 8." That's basically the Ritalin phenomenon in a nutshell. But selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors have been thrown at teenagers on a different level, and it's not just ADHD. It's anytime they have normal teenage anxiety, anytime they have a problem, the kid is lonely, and so the kid is sad, and so the kid has anxiety, and the kid talks about being anxious, and the doctor throws meds and never bothers to find out why. You know,
See,
and the kid,
now I'm thinking that if my past had been different at a pivotal point in my history, would I not have severe OCD right now? Because I never would have been put on Ritalin, and I never would have had the stress that I had.
It's entirely possible that the longitudinal studies have just only started to come to fruition in terms of giving stimulants to children to deal with ADHD, right? And the results don't look good. They cause permanent kind of changes to, or permanent. They cause differences in the development of the developing brain, right?
all
And
psych meds do.
Yeah.
And a lot of other drugs as well.
Yeah, so like I would, like, my son, 16 years old, and he's like, "Well, weed's legal in Canada, Mom. Can't I have some? You let me have cider when we go to grandma's, right?" And I'm like, "You're not fucking touching that." Right? Like I literally have a freaking $180 bottle of oil, right? So about half THC, half CBD, right? For my boyfriend, right? And he takes a drop or two under the tongue and you know, settles him down and sorts him out and all of that stuff, right? I have no problem with pot, not for somebody whose brain is still developing. I don't think that, you know, that's something that should be habitual, right? Maybe once in a while, but not habitual. Once in a while, a drink or two for my 16-year-old son when we go to his grandma's, right? But not habitually, not every day. That's not something that is a good idea. And so it's like, essentially we have this situation where, I mean, I'm looking at it, you know, from up here in Canada, right, where they're recommending that family doctors prescribe puberty blockers and cross hormone therapy at age 13, right? And thinking, like, when are the massive class action lawsuits against medical practitioners gonna, like, are we gonna be waiting 10 years, 15 years? How long?
That needs to go against the parents too, by the way. Those legal.
Oh yeah, no, they'll be against the parents too. But it's like, because you know, I wasn't old enough for you to let me decide my own curfew or make my own nutritional choices. I wasn't old enough to drive a car. I wasn't old enough to vote. I wasn't old enough to give my life for my country, right? I wasn't old enough to drink.
Not old enough to take an aspirin at school without a doctor's note.
Yeah, and you let me make this life-altering decision, right? You, my parents, let me do that, and you, the government, told my parents if they didn't let me do that, you would take me away from them. Yeah, no. This is like, we are going down a really fucking fucked up path.
Well, devil's advocate on this one. When I was 12 years old, I was making better decisions for myself than all the adults who were supposed to be.
Yeah, the rare exception.
You know, there are so many comorbidities that occur with transgenderism that, you know, I am not prepared to say that we shouldn't just wait until somebody's a legal adult before they can make those kinds of permanent, life-altering, irreversible decisions.
Well, and that those types of life-altering decisions should be made not, you know, instantly, but after extensive therapy to determine, because they're not reversible.
So there's that 12-year-old boy in the UK.
They came out with
he trans, right? And then 2 years later, he was like, "No, I want my sex back."
Yeah, and it's not the same when you go back. It's not the same.
It's not.
It's never the same. You can't undo. Yeah,
but even if you've done it just hormonally, it's never going to be the same. And with New Jersey, they have actually come out with a new way that, like it's $6.
Okay,
and
we're not going to get into a long discussion on this.
You can pay to change your birth certificate.
Yeah, we're not going to get into a long discussion about this because it's past time when we really should be getting close to the close of the show.
All I want to say is they used to have to present medical records that they'd had surgery. Right now, they can just send in a form and get it changed on their birth certificate. And I'm like, mixed feelings, because I don't want to normalize this necessarily, but the fewer people who feel compelled to have surgery to get what they want, the better.
No, this is another one we could do a whole show on this. But if we do, there's someone that I'd like to bring on that we don't have on tonight. So I want to table this one for another time. But in any case, I'm gonna go on with the super chats, and we're at a pretty dark one. This is Syria de Flora again, following up on the previous super chat. Syria de Flora gave us $10 and said, "Mom tried poisoning her multiple times." This is the mom who tried to take the child's liver. At one point, if you're poisoning your child to get their liver, not only are you an abusive parent, an evil person, you're also really stupid, because what do you think is going to process the poison? But in any case, at one point she begged the girl, 12-ish, to cuddle on the kitchen floor. She woke up laying on a blanket and a shower curtain with her mom over her with a knife. That's when you run away. Like, from home, run away, leave, get out. And I actually, I can't believe the kid survived that. If there had to have been some help. But that's just a horrifying now I want to know what happened to the mother. And I know, if you can comment on this with the rest of the story after the show, that's just profoundly disturbing, and is probably something we might want to talk about on another episode also. I want to know what happened with this case. I hope somebody rescued this child. But in any case, I'm gonna go on because we don't know any more details at this point. Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and said, "How do I become Karen's 10th husband?" And my answer to that is you have to go to the timeline where Karen has had 9 divorces.
I have to have 8 more husbands.
Yeah.
And 8 more divorces before you can become my 10th husband.
Yep, you have to go to the timeline where Karen has had all those divorces.
I am not polyandrous. Not interested. So.
There you go.
Yeah.
Meredith Glassberg gave us $5 and said, "Bureaucracy is a self-perpetuating system that will destroy any effort to shrink or dismantle it." That, folks, in a nutshell, is what we are seeing in the effort to take Trump down. The bureaucrats in Washington are terrified.
Nobody wants to be made obsolete or redundant, right? Nobody wants to be laid off.
Well, that's why we have all those expansions to Title IX. Because when Title IX passed, once it took effect, it became obsolete. It was no longer necessary. The changes had been made. Very little enforcement was ever really needed. And there wasn't a need for an agency or department or an office or anything to really handle Title IX. This is something that could have been handled through individual civil cases, essentially, against individual defendants, individual universities. But there was an office, and there was an agency, and there was a group of people who needed to keep their jobs. In the education department, the folks that were the Title IX administration in the education department needed to come up with a reason why we needed them. And so they started tweaking the law. And they've continued to tweak it since the 70s. And now we're at, this ridiculous level. I'm going to let Karn sort of close us out. He had said that there is a line of thought paramount to tonight's discussion waiting. So, Karn, if you want to unmute and take it away.
Okay, so I want to ask you a series of really quick questions, and if you could answer so it's not a monotone thing. How many single mothers are there? Or actually, let me rephrase it. How many children only have a single mother parent?
Well, the last thing I read, it was almost half.
Yeah, it was
States is about to half.
Okay, so about half. Now, when we have the teachers, how many teachers, percentage-wise, are female?
85%. So it gets more female heavy the lower in the grades you get.
I was going to say in elementary school it's almost.
So we have our children being raised primarily, solely by female influence.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's
if you need to teach your children your sons not to rape, if you need to teach your children not to abuse women, if you need to teach them all these things, women need to do better. Because it's not the men's fault at that point when all the children, or at least most of the children, are being raised with single female influence, and yet you assume that they're the primary abusers, they're the primary destructors of society, and they're primarily bad. If men are inherently bad, it's because women have failed them.
Yep, it's because women have raised them that way. And you have the situation where not only are all of the primary influences, all of the primary mentoring influences in little boys' lives female, they are completely lacking in understanding of the experiences that boys have as males, and they are many of them are disdainful themselves of the male sex, and so they are not just real quick. They're not just failing boys; they are training boys that they are bad, and that it is normal for them to be bad, and that they should essentially expect themselves to be bad.
Agreed. I'm gonna take this moment to recommend Tom Golden's book. I forget the name of it, but I think it's something like How Mothers Can Become Closer to Their Sons, something like that, where he actually discusses in depth. He looks at it like, okay, so mothers were girls at one time, and so they're probably going to understand their daughters, and they're going to be able to relate to their daughters, but they might not have that same kind of instant relatability with their sons. And so here I'm going to write a book essentially telling moms what boys are all about, right? And letting moms know that play fighting's not necessarily a bad thing, and rough and tumble play is not necessarily a bad thing, and boys are just generally going to be fussier even as babies, because they have higher stress levels and they need more care and more reassurance and all of these things, right? That's what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to help mothers understand their sons. And I think that's probably, I think it's a wonderful thing that he's done. He's gone into the biology, he's gone into the sociology, he's gone into the, all of the, anthropology, everything, right? And come up with a way for mothers to better understand their sons and better, I guess, accept their sons for who they are. And I think that's a good thing.
And
so
to find those, you can actually go to he's got a website, and it's T Golden, just the letter T and the word golden, all one word, .com, and it's on his about page, and all of his books I think are listed on there, but that one's actually the first one that comes up if you scroll down below on the about page. if you scroll down below his description of himself and his experience and everything, and you start to see the list of books, that's the first one that comes up. So it's definitely, he's got several books out, and they're all they're valuable in different ways. He's got writing on the way men heal. He's got writing on obviously mothers being able to be closer to their sons. And he's also got a blog, menaregood.com. But yeah, I can't recommend.
And a YouTube channel,
menaregood.com. That's the one I recommend. I can't recommend Tom enough. I mean, it's just got a lot of respect for him.
Put a link in the down below.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Okay, also, Super Chat, Super Chat from Xeranx. Never mind that men were forced out of elementary school. The kids are still predated upon by their teachers. Problem wasn't solved.
Yeah, no, that's another aspect.
Predator.
Yeah, well, he's talking about teachers preying on their students, and what we've seen is now it's just that there are more women doing it, because the problem wasn't failure to protect children from men. Men are not bad. The problem was their vetting system for the character of the teachers they were hiring, and the fact that when a teacher is accused, instead of having a solid investigation, getting to the bottom of things, finding out what really happened, and dealing with the issue, if there has been a violation, they pass the teacher on to another school system and sweep it under the rug. So instead of so you don't find out if an innocent teacher is innocent, and believe it or not, there's actually talk between school systems. Students learn from other students. Oh yeah, this teacher used to teach at my school. He was accused of doing this. This teacher used to teach at my school. She was accused of doing that. But the other end of it is, and then that teacher is ineffective because now the students at their school think that they did something, whether they did or not. When the other end of it is, if a teacher actually did do something and the schools just pass them on to another school rather than investigating, or rather than turning the information over to the police and letting the police investigate, you have students that have been victimized that don't get the therapy they need. And they may go on to become predators. There is that chance. And if they don't, they have other serious issues in their lives. And you also have a teacher that may go on to prey on students at another school and another school and another. So there's a whole profound series of issues there. And it has nothing to do with the gender of the teacher and everything to do with the failure. And part of it is wrapped up in the teachers' unions. They will protect teachers under these circumstances. It has everything to do with the failure to vet the teachers and a failure to handle the problem with an eye toward protecting the kids and protecting the reputations of teachers who are innocent.
Yeah, we had actually an angel of death here in Canada just recently. I forget what her name is. She killed something like 6 people. She worked in nursing homes. She was a nurse, and she killed 6 people and tried to kill 8 more or something like that. And her union defended her, right? Her union, after like the first 2 or 3 deaths, defended her, negotiated a severance agreement that did not mention the gross negligence that they assumed was going on. They did not realize, I think, at that time that she was intentionally killing people. But they certainly fired her for gross negligence and resulting in death. And her nurses' union negotiated a severance agreement or a separation agreement, I guess they call them here, where that would not be mentioned. They essentially said that she voluntarily left. She quit her job, or she wasn't fired. She quit her job, and then she went on to kill more people. So, I mean, it really is like there is such a thing as, unions coming in and acting as defense attorneys when that's not really their role.
Right.
and letting people get away with things over and over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I can totally see that happening with teachers.
There's also the issue of school administrators not wanting to admit it happened there. It happened at their school.
Isn't that the biggest hypocrisy ever?
Yeah.
If you tell me the truth now, then you'll be fine. But if you lie or try to cover it up, the consequences will be worse. And what do? They cover up every time there's a scandal.
Well, and the stupid thing is...
This is what puts the lie to the rape culture myth.
Yeah.
Right? Like Steubenville. Steubenville put the lie to the rape culture myth. Right? Okay, you have these guys, these high school football heroes in a dead-end town that all they have, really, is high school football. Right? They were like an economically depressed town that was like on the verge of collapse. Right? And all they had was high school football and these high school football stars. Right? And then you have this thing that they did, right? And then everybody covered it up. Well, nobody covers up when somebody steals a fucking chocolate bar, right? Walks out of a store with a chocolate bar without paying for it, or takes a I don't know. I had a friend who used to do this before I grew her a conscience. Used to take the store brand of hair dye and put the actual contents of the box into the brand name, right? And take the brand name stuff and put it in the store brand stuff and buy that because it was cheaper, right? You know, like nobody covers that up. Nobody engages in a freaking cover up.
For something minor,
something like that, because that's not a big deal. You know what's a big deal? Finger fucking a passed out girl and videotaping it and then bragging about it and filming yourself bragging about it. Right? Yep. That's what causes people, and you're a guy who's like holding the whole fucking town together because everybody's depressed, everybody's poor, everybody's unemployed. And everybody goes to the football games and you perform there, right? And so, of course they're going to cover it up. You know why? Not because it's trivial, not because it's normative, but because it's fucked up. That's why.
Because it's hard to look at and hard to confront.
Mm-hmm.
And because it challenges your notions.
You know, I'd like to say something about the Steubenville thing, something that no one seems to address on, that I seem to have picked up on. If you remember the story, the mother was telling those boys who, well, I'll admit, they are bastard-coded bastards filled with bastardness inside. But the mother's berating those boys, and I'm thinking, your daughter gets drunk at all these parties and passes out at so many of them that they were able to plan this.
Yeah.
Okay, so where the fuck were you?
Oh no, of course.
That's another good question, and
but nobody wants to look at that.
Yeah,
nobody wants to look at that. Nobody wants to look at the fact that outside of the tiny microcosmos of this tiny little town, right, who were desperately trying to cover it up. Once the story was blown up,
everybody was shocked.
Media, everybody freaked out, right, because everybody was outraged, because that's what people are. And even the people involved were probably outraged, but they were just desperate to not be blamed.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that's another one of those issues or situations that so we have this phenomenon in the human psyche where we run up against something that forces us to challenge our preconceived notions about a group of people or about ourselves, about our society, about our environment. And instead of dealing with it, instead of looking at the monster in the closet, we run away. We turn around and we run away. We won't look at it. We won't talk about it. We definitely won't take measures to deal with the situation. And we end up with this repeating cycle, both in our schools and in the rest of our society, of dysfunction that is upsetting and horrifying to everybody, that is damaging to the individual, that is damaging to the community, that we do not solve because the underlying conditions that lead to that dysfunction are attached to things that we don't want to confront. You know, that there is no such thing as a perfect child. There is no such thing
a perfect victim
as
or
a perfect
right.
A perfect victim. There is no such thing as a completely 100% irredeemable evil person. And there is no such thing as an angel on earth. And until we stop lying to ourselves about these things, we can't deal with the situation of, hey, you know, maybe the school shooter phenomenon has something to do with the fact that in our society today, there is a large population of boys who not only have no male mentors in their sphere of existence, but are also being chemically altered by drugs instead of being offered any kind of solution to their needs, any kind of parenting, any kind of school services, any kind of anything to meet their needs as boys. Because the first thing that we butt up against is, but single mothers are superheroes. You can't be angry with them. And it's not about being angry with single mothers. It's about looking into the details of the situation and seeing what needs to change in the lives of these boys so that this doesn't happen. You know, we can't confront that issue. We can't deal with the issue of domestic violence until we are able to admit that women can be violent and men can be pushed past the point of their self-control, and that it's not a moral issue when they are. It's an instinct issue.
I want to say something. We talked a lot, as well, specifically I talked a lot about women and the excuse being, oh, she's under this much stress. You don't know what she's going through, so it's okay that she left her baby in a trash can in freezing -20 weather. But here's the thing, and I've seen women make this threat. I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to take your house. I'm going to take all the money in their bank account. I'm going to destroy your life. I'm going to make your life a living hell. Yeah, and you know what? All those threats are very, very real.
Yeah,
very stressful.
But
what do you expect him to do after that?
The thing with that, right, is because he instinctively knows, right, that she can do all of that, and that if he actually even objects, right, he might be beaten, he might be put in a cage, you know, he might be, like, there will, and it won't be her doing it. It won't be her doing it. It will be men bigger than him with weapons who will come and handcuff him and
with
do
weapons
all of it.
And government authority.
Yes,
and
when
you have nothing to lose,
right?
And
like when women do that, they don't understand what they're threatening a man with. They think, oh, I'm just a little woman. Why is he scared of me? No, he's not scared of you.
I think there are women who do that and know exactly what they're threatening him with.
Oh,
I have watched a man go through court through 7 years. I watched another friend of mine go through much longer than that, but his case, I didn't have the documentation from his case to be able to write about it like I did the 7 Years in Hell story. But that was absolutely deliberate, and the woman doing it knew exactly what was going to happen every single time she called the cops, every single time she told her neighbors, every single time she went into a bar and complained to a bunch of men in a bar that knew her and cared about her, that this guy was abusing her and stalking her and threatening her. And at one point, each of my two friends that have really been through the worst ordeals of this, each of them was accused falsely, very, very blatantly falsely, like with impossible accusations that got changed repeatedly, of rape. And they know when women do this, when you get one that is a vexatious, malicious,
sociopath.
A vexatious litigant that engages in malicious prosecution. She's not doing it because she just wants to threaten the guy. She's doing it because she wants to destroy him.
Do you remember the article I sent you on him?
Well, in any case, guys, it is 10 o'clock.
The only thing she's guilty of is filing a false police report.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it.
And when you get into discussions with people, you start talking about, there should be recourse for this. There should be retribution. A woman files a false complaint, and it's proved beyond a reasonable doubt that she did file a false complaint knowingly and willfully. She should go to jail for the amount of time the guy would have gone to jail if he'd been convicted. Say that once, and you get flamed.
Right, exactly. But I think the other side of the coin here is that, men need to really stand up for themselves, okay? Because these types of women, there are red flags everywhere, okay? If you tell a woman that you will not put up with this type of behavior, and if that is her option, that, then you can leave.
It doesn't work that way. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't. With these two women, there's two different women, two different personalities. One of them, there were red flags. The guy, I grew up with him, and honestly, he was abused by most of the society around him because he had a speech impediment. He was one of those guys that, if he was out of his normal community, he was very popular, but in his normal community, he was really mistreated. And he became accustomed, essentially, to blinding himself to red flags in people to a degree, because there was a level of abuse that he learned to put up with because it was his normal. Society trained him, essentially, to accept being treated like shit. And the other guy, his whole family, like everyone in his family, has said the woman who put him through 7 years of malicious prosecution was a sociopath, is a sociopath. And she hid it very well until she hit the point when she didn't. Yeah, when something happened. Well, what happened in that instance? He decided not to put up with a mistreatment. Like, she incrementally increased mistreatment of him until she had another man's baby. And he was like, oh no, that's it, I'm out of here. Yet another man's baby, we're done. They had 50-50 shared custody. A very rare thing here in Ohio. There's a different setup that's the default, but that's what they agreed on. And it was working out. She got together with a guy that was similar to her in his handling of conflict. And so when she was aggressive towards that guy, he was aggressive back. And in the meantime, she neglected the child from the first marriage to the point where the only way the child could get attention was by being annoying. And so I didn't like that so much at her father's house. But at her mother's house, all she could do was cry and whine and yell and scream and be pushy. And so the guy responded, the second boyfriend, the boyfriend that she had the baby with, actually, responded by beating her black and blue. 4-year-old little kid, as adorable as Shirley Temple.
Jesus.
And for the stepmom, the good wife in that story, how she managed to do it, she had the wherewithal to get pictures of how that little girl's face looked when she was still scared from the beating. She was still tear-streaked, black and blue all over her face, and they took those pictures into CPS, and they got protective custody. And that's when the false accusations started. Wow. I don't think
you guys realize the power you have. I really don't think you guys do.
Oh, I do.
My whole life, every time I've had an opinion on anything, it's, oh, because you're a man, blah, 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 blah. When you guys speak, right, there are men who listen, and there are a shit ton of women who listen that you don't even know of, because right, when it's a guy saying it's because he's the patriarchy, and they buy in the feminist crap, right? So the reason a man dies, or the reason a man drinks the sand in the desert, is because he doesn't have anything else to drink. Information is the same way. Feminists keep pushing out and pushing out and pushing out all this bullshit information, and people drink it because they have nothing else. And they won't listen when a man presents this information because it's he's just doing it for his own personal objective, right? But
And
when
men
you
are not allowed
women
to have
come out
self-interest.
Huh?
And men are not allowed to have self-interest.
Yeah. But when you women speak out, right, other women start to listen. Other men, they go, oh, okay, I didn't see it this way. These things I've been told about other men are lies because they've only been raised by women to believe that all men are bad, but they're the one good man because that's what they've been told. They follow the feminist rule book, right, on how you're supposed to treat women, and then they don't get dates.
Be the one woke bae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
thank you from the bottom of my heart, and a lot of other men that you guys have been helping out. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, I'll cut it out. That
all right,
I don't deal with that as well. But I've been glad to do it, and I've been glad to do it since that case, actually, because I realized that people would listen to us and they wouldn't listen to him. When he would talk about his experiences, he was treated like he must be lying, right? And that was something that that's what got me started talking about it, was the fact that people would listen to me talk about it, people wouldn't listen to him talk about it. But I'm going to go on with the last super chat, and then I've got to get us on into the after show because I actually work tonight and I have to leave. So this is a long sausage. So yeah,
twist it and snip it.
Our last super chat is Anth Bobo gave us $2 Canadian. Only way men can stand up for themselves is to go MGTOW. And I'm not going to argue with that because I would love to say something, be able to come up with something to say that would argue that is not.
That argument is for a different day and a different discussion.
Yeah, it gets us. There's another thing. There isn't really a good argument for why men should do anything but go MGTOW. The only thing I can say is don't rely on it as your only defense. You still have to pay attention because women can point to a guy on Facebook and say he's the father or he raped me and still set those wheels in motion. So there is that. But we've discussed that before, and this is a show for another time. I would like to thank my whole crew here tonight for the super long sausage that we have created.
Which is being twisted and snipped right now.
Yes. I would like to thank everybody who is behind HBR Talk that makes it happen in the background. And all of you who stuck out this 3 hour and 15 minutes long now
last
show
two things
that started late. Yeah.
You know you're in a roomy vagina when you can't tell if you're having sex or if you just walked through the Stargate.
Oh, God.
What's
the other one?
You know you're in a roomy vagina when you can't tell if you're having sex or if you're in a bouncy castle.
Oh, I like that one better. That's the best one. And with that, I think we're going to end the show because there is no better way to end the show than with a Karn joke.
Vaginas and memory foam.
Oh, night all.